What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of the Tasteless podcast. This was the last episode we recorded before releasing the first episode to the public. This episode, I'm interviewing Gerald from Core A Gaming. If you're unfamiliar with Core A Gaming, I would definitely check out their YouTube channel. I think this is some of the very best gaming content that's out there. It's really smart. My favorite video was the consequences of reducing the skill gap. Melty, what ones did you like?
Two of them that I really liked were why we should buff more than we should nerf and the effects of salt. Both of those were excellent episodes.
So if you haven't seen these already, definitely check that out. If you have, you're definitely going to be excited that I'm interviewing him here. Also, please support us on Patreon. We're getting an AMA set up. I think we have 26 donors, right?
28.
28 donors. And if we get to 100, I'll be doing an AMA. Again, guys, thank you all of you so much for the support. It's really appreciated. And I guess without further ado, let's hop into episode 3 with Core A Gaming's Gerald. All right, dude. Welcome to the Tasteless podcast, man. Thank you for coming down.
Thanks for having me.
So I think I'm generally identified as an RTS guy, but I actually grew up around fighting games. You were the same age, right? You're 34?
I'm 35 now,
35.
So I was born in 83. So yeah, we're pretty similar. You're like 1 year younger than me. So.
Yeah, so then we were, as kids around the same time when there were arcades. Did you grow up with fighting games in arcades, or was it more of an at-home thing?
Definitely, I grew up with fighting games in the arcades, and the big game, obviously, is Street Fighter 2, right? So World Warrior, the original one where you couldn't select the boss characters, and you couldn't even select the same character. So I remember growing up in the arcades, basically, whenever I could find a cabinet, they'd usually be at malls, pizza shops, or liquor stores, stuff like that. So I picked Guile and basically zoned everybody, and that was like my strategy.
Were you nervous playing against? Well, hold on. First of all, how old were you when you first started actually trying to play in an arcade setting? You're saying Street Fighter 2?
Yeah, Street Fighter 2. So Street Fighter 2 that came out in like 91, right? So
I think so.
I was probably I probably played it like right when it came out, like, so that mean I'd be like 8 or something like that, right? So 8 or 9. I was a kid in these arcades.
Did your parents give you quarters? How did that work?
Yeah, so basically, my mom would drop me off at the arcade at the mall a lot, because she would kind of need me to like try on some clothes, make sure it fit and everything. And then when she was done with my stuff, like, she just let me go to the arcade and give me a little bit of money to play.
Yeah.
And basically what happened was I realized that with this game, if I won, I could keep on playing, right? And you get to go to the next character, and then if there's like other people playing, you could play those people. And I was able to only spend a few quarters, and basically I'd give back money to my mom after playing Street Fighter 2.
Oh, damn, you're better than me then.
Yeah.
I always kept all the quarters. I'd always try to sneak back. I lived across the street from a mall. I wasn't allowed to play games until it was 3 p.m. in the afternoon, so I'd leave the house with my brother, and we'd steal quarters from the house or where we could find it, and then play there. And so you mained with Guile then in the arcade while your mom was shopping or doing whatever in the mall?
Yeah, basically, I mean, at first, of course, I wasn't so great, so I would use all my mom's money that she gave me. But then slowly it got to the point where I was able to just go with like 50 cents. That's how much it cost. It was some arcades that were cool. It was 25 cents, right? It was just one quarter.
The better ones, yeah.
But they knew Street Fighter 2 was hot at the time, so you'd have to put 2 quarters in. And so with just 50 cents, sometimes I'd just be able to like be at the mall the whole time with that amount of money, and there'd be like a lot of people around the cabinet like playing against this kid. And so, yeah, I mean, this is something that's really great if you're like a little kid, because how often do you get to like beat adults at anything, right? When you're a kid, it's like, it's such a great feeling. Like, oh, I'm making this guy mad. I totally like outsmarted this guy, and it makes you feel so powerful as a kid. So I think it was one of the best experiences just in gaming at that time.
Did you have any rivals or anything like that when you go to the arcades? Was there any older guy that you had to watch out for?
Yeah, so in Arlington, where I'm from, there's a putt-putt I used to go to, And this was later on. This is when I got a little bit older. This was when I think Second Impact came out, and there was like a little scene there, right? So I didn't know anything about like FGC stuff. FGC is like, you have like the legends, and you have these West Coast, East Coast rivalries, and I didn't really know anything about that, but I did know about my local arcade at Putt Putt, and basically it was just a bunch of guys that came regularly, and they would be playing whatever the new Capcom fighter was, and those guys were actually really good. And that's the first time I realized that, like, wow, there are actually people that are good at this game, and that's when like people really schooled me. And I think everybody has that moment where you realize that you're not as good as you thought you were, just because you beat some people like mashing buttons at a mall. So that was kind of my first humbling moment. But I got better with those guys, and so it was fun to like play people who were like pretty skilled.
Did you have any other games you played in the arcade? Because I know for me personally, I was it was actually kind of rare to have this happen in the States, but I was introduced to a game called Beat Mania, which was kind of like the hardcore rhythm game with buttons, and it had a little turntable. And just like, I guess, for a lot of the North Americans and Europeans listening to this, I mean, it's like Guitar Hero, but maybe a little bit harder, I would say.
Yeah, I know Beat Mania. That game was pretty popular back in the day.
Yeah, I think it was especially popular in Japan and Hong Kong, a couple other places. But I got into that, and I would watch these guys playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And eventually, I was a lot younger, but I remember eventually getting the courage to ask them to kind of show me how to play, because, especially for a lot of these fighting games, I think to learn in an arcade is so difficult.
Yes, it's very difficult because a lot of people in the arcades, they're not just going to be nice and be like, all right, let me just take you under my wing and show you. Sometimes you won't get any respect unless you're able to beat them or give them some kind of challenge, right? So this was during a time when knowledge was not widely available, right? You didn't have the internet or anything like that. So I remember people would be doing fatalities. And because the command was kind of, you had to have like a magazine subscription or something to know some of these things.
Yeah.
Like they do the command and they hide their hands while doing it, like a fatality, so that you wouldn't see it, or you wouldn't check. Not that I was checking or anything, but I noticed like there were people doing that. So there's definitely like a kind of a gatekeeping exclusivity to some of these people. I'm sure there are people that were more welcoming and stuff like that. Actually, there were when I went to that arcade in Arlington, but yeah, there are a lot of people who just kind of like to keep that stuff secret because it makes them feel cool or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound too old in this podcast, but yeah, we're definitely from a different generation. It was a different time back then where you almost had to have access to a certain degree of community, or at least know the right people. You couldn't just Google something. Even if you got access to a magazine, you had to have the right people to play with to even improve. And one thing I've always found most interesting about the FGC in general is just that it's very connected. Everything happens with people adjacent to each other. They're communicating. I think StarCraft is in some ways, especially nowadays, kind of the polar opposite, where we play apart from each other. People kind of are caged off from even giving each other information or build orders, where I think people are a lot more reliant in FGC, and it's a lot more, I guess, overall kind of community oriented.
Yeah, definitely. So the community aspect of it is kind of one of the reasons why, like, having a community is definitely a way to improve and get better, because those people will be able to pool their knowledge and share techniques and show you things. So there will be these communities kind of roaming around. And if you were not part of that community, you wouldn't have access to that knowledge. And then when you played one of those people, they'd be doing these unblockables, and they'd be doing all these things that you've never seen before. And, you kind of want to learn how to do that, but it's like you kind of have to, like, get initiated. And so there's definitely this kind of arcade culture to it. And I think it affects the way fighting gamers kind of see these kind of games, right? So some things are super cryptic in some of these fighting games, right? They're like really difficult to kind of wrap your mind around. But a lot of these things were discovered because there were some glitches in the games, and these glitches turned out to be like what you needed to know to be competitive. And so there's kind of this concept of emergent gaming or emergent gameplay, right? Where you have things that are going on where the developers didn't really intend, and it's kind of something, some developers don't like it, but the people who play it, they kind of use these techniques and end up making the meta into like something that no one has ever seen before. And so a lot of these games will have things like that where eventually it will become a mainstream thing where later the developers were like, oh, let's put that in there on purpose. Of course, the most famous examples being like combos, right? And canceling and stuff like that. That's something that like kind of wasn't really intended, but due to like a side effect of like the input leniency algorithm, you have this kind of new technique, and the players have a lot of fun with it. And if the developers are like, hey, cool, this is awesome, they put it in the next game and they kind of streamline it so it's like part of the game and less janky, right?
It seems like all the big competitive gaming titles were unintentionally built off the backs of bugs, or I guess some people would say they're features, right? But in StarCraft, even when they interview the developers, the original people that made the game, all those guys said they did not see the game or did not anticipate the game being played at that speed. Even running away with a unit that has range and then attacking and then running away, so microing or kiting, nobody had thought of that ahead of time. It just kind of came to be, and then there's all sorts of other bugs that would come up later on that you could exploit. And it's kind of an interesting thing now when you have all these AAA gaming publishers trying to figure out, okay, obviously there were things that were intended and unintended, but do we build off of that or do we fix it? I mean, we're seeing this. We've seen this in RTS in general. I think to probably a better degree than some other games. We've seen issues with Smash Brothers where the designers were saying, we never really intended for Melee to be the way it was, like with wave dashing, for instance.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, what is your? And I know this is a big question, but what is your take on bugs? I mean, how should a developer try to approach this? Because there are some things that obviously can always be improved on within the next iteration of a game, but there are sometimes these unintended, beautiful consequences that can come out that I think we see get patched. Let's talk about, I guess in this case, fighting games.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, so this is kind of a thing where I think there's kind of a spectrum, right? So on one end, you have something that just completely destroys the game, right? So like you have, the handcuff glitch that Guile can do in Street Fighter 2, right? Where he can just basically, he basically locks onto the character, and they call it handcuffs because that character can't move or anything. And basically, the game is kind of stuck like that until the time runs out, right? So if you were to use that in a match, it's just like, all right, I use this glitch, and like now the time is just gonna run out, and everyone has to wait, right? And stuff like that is kind of like it's obvious that you don't want that in a competitive atmosphere, right? But then there's stuff that's a little bit more iffy, right? There's some techniques that are not intended. Like there's like a thing that T-Hawk can do in Super Turbo, like a SPD loop, where like it's a very powerful technique that once you get caught in, you're just going to die. But only a few people are able to pull it off, right?
Because of the skill cap.
Yeah, because it's just like this really difficult thing to do, and then suddenly that doesn't become this game-breaking thing where every tournament you see people just using that one thing, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with how much does it affect the game and in what way. And sometimes the developers, they of course they're all doing their best to find that right balance. But I think if you go too much in one direction where you just let certain things just happen, and that's fine, then the game might not be competitive, and that's fine too. Not every game has to be competitive off the bat. But then there's the other spectrum of okay, now let's that's not cool, that wasn't intended, let's not let any of this stuff that was unintended through, and we're just going to patch up every single little hole and do make this game exactly we're going to make the players play exactly the way we want them to play. I think that's the other end of the spectrum. So there's kind of like a middle ground, right? And the FGC basically they're kind of used to the arcade culture where basically There were no real patches. I mean, there were some like small stealth revisions and stuff, but basically, like if you're playing like a version of Third Strike, then that's kind of what you had, right? And if somebody was using a technique that was like kind of OP or powerful, or maybe just using like Chun in Third Strike, right? That's really good, and you really couldn't go complain to the arcade owner, I want my money back, I want my quarters back.
Right.
This guy was just laming me out with Chun, and it was no fun. You can't do that. So like, there's, I think, a big part of this kind of get good culture kind of came from that arcade atmosphere, and I think you can see it today in fighting gamers. But of course, it's stuff like that is also shifting little by little, because now we're kind of in a more modern era where arcades are, people are playing games that never been to an arcade. That's like a regular thing, right?
Do you think that's actually making it more challenging for people that want to get into fighting games if many people are playing from home? I mean, I know that on some level, not everybody's going to have access to an arcade, but just like the Koreans got good at StarCraft in part because there were PC cafes everywhere, I find it so difficult to imagine trying to improve at a fighting game just by playing on the internet.
Yeah. So, improving at a fighting game is, that's a big topic in and of itself, right? So, I guess the way you do it nowadays is, there are some similarities to the past where it really is good to just have somebody sit there next to you and teach. Josh at the game bar that we go to.
Right.
I'm kind of teaching him Street Fighter 5 right now, and it's like even when I'm there in person, it's like it's still like a challenge to teach like all these concepts. He's like learning from scratch, right?
Right.
He's like learning
no foundation.
No foundation, and teaching somebody from that is still like it's a big hurdle, right? And just imagine just like learning this by yourself, like by yourself on the couch, and you're just like going through like YouTube videos and stuff like that. I mean, it's very difficult. I understand that, but of course the old school arcade guys, they're gonna be like, well, back in my day, I didn't, I had to pay every time I wanted to just play against the CPU. I had to pay to just like even like make the controls work on the games, because they didn't have the home versions at the time. So, there's, I think that's another part of this kind of this big like get good thing, this get good culture from fighting games is there. You had the odds were against you to learn fighting games to a competitive level back in the day. There's another thing to consider as well. It's like, how good do you have to be, right? So if you want to get to a certain level, obviously you're gonna need some training. If you want to get to the top levels, it's good to have like mentors and stuff like that. And
right.
But then like, do you really have to be that good as well? So there's kind of this thing called the skill floor as opposed to the skill ceiling, where how long does it take for you to get to the point where you kind of get the game and you're like doing all the things that are available in the game, and of course from there you can go to all the exploits and all the glitches, and when you get to the very highest levels, right? So I think a big part of it is how good do you want to get, and if you just want to button mash and like have fun, then that's not really a hurdle or anything, right? It's not really
sure. Yeah. I've seen some people complain. I'm curious what you think about this. Street Fighter 5, for instance, when that came out, a lot of people said it just wasn't accessible for new people. Now, it's hard for me to relate to that because, like you, I grew up playing Street Fighter. So I've just kind of been acquainted with 2D fighters.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were saying that, the single player was sort of bare bones. Now, for me personally, and this includes StarCraft as well, I've never really cared about the single player.
Okay. Yeah.
I haven't even beat Legacy of the Void yet.
Okay.
I'm way more obsessed with the multiplayer. But do you feel like there's some kind of an overall barrier? And I want to put this question along with, I think, a bigger question, which is that have people become too do people complain too much when a game isn't made accessible to them?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of people who have seen my videos will probably know that I'd probably say that there is kind of this this kind of culture of, this is hard and I'm gonna go straight to social media and just rail on the developer, rail on people who are better than me, rail on everybody, right? And I think it's partially because we have social media these days. I know we talked about social media before, but it kind of allows anybody to just voice their opinion directly to the guy responsible, right? So in a lot of cases, you have like Harada, who's active on Twitter, and he answers questions and he talks to people. Can you just
tell the viewers who Harada is real fast?
So Harada is the producer of Tekken, and basically he's the guy that you curse if your character sucks or whatever. You can say, oh, I'm going to email Harada, right?
Right. Yeah, they had that with David Kim when StarCraft 2 came out as well.
Exactly, right. So there's always there's always somebody who's kind of like, you joke that I'm going to email that person when something doesn't go my way. Harada's that for Tekken, right? And basically, he's I forgot what event it was at, but like him and Michael Murray, his partner, I think they showed their shirts which said, "Don't ask me for shit."
Yeah,
and that's super famous, right? And I think a lot of that is coming from all these communication routes straight to the developers, right? And everyone's asking Harada, oh, why isn't this character in my game? Can you patch this? This is overpowered. So at a certain point, you can't just listen to everything that your audience says, because then you're not making the product anymore, right?
Right.
And it's just the mob making the product, and that's just going to be a mess, right? So you need to have kind of a visionary at the helm to kind of like oversee how this product's going to be. And I think that's really important for any competitive game, really. Just like somebody who can kind of have a vision for the product.
It also seems like a lot of times you have these games that are turn out to be incredibly great on a competitive level, but they were built with different intentions, right? I mean, we've seen this with, I want to say, almost every game that ended up becoming competitive that wasn't a mod originally.
Yeah.
I think clearly in the very early days of Street Fighter, this was intended that you could play against each other and have fun, but as it gets more and more complex and there's combos or like infinites in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or wave dashing, I've always wondered if maybe it was a mistake by some of these publishers to not keep some of that in there and then try to build in a mode that would teach you how to do that. I mean, when I look at like even Street Fighter 4, which was the one I got to play the most, the training mode is very bare. It's almost like it was like an alien gave you a weird looking Rubik's Cube and didn't tell you what to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. It doesn't even have all the combos.
Yeah.
And Street Fighter 5 is I mean, granted, the training mode is pretty helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't quite give you enough. And with Tekken 7, I thought they really put a lot of love into the training mode. And correct me if you think differently.
The training modes seem like the training modes these days are like pretty good, I would say, just compared to like, in the previous days where like, well, there were no training modes back in the old days, right?
You just messed around against a computer.
Yeah,
in the campaign.
Except for Sailor Moon S, which actually has a training mode. It's like a 1994 SNES or Super Famicom game with a training mode. They're so ahead of their time.
Wow.
But I guess we can talk about that game later. But just definitely training modes these days are good, and there's a lot of things meant for competitive players. You can, in all these games, you pretty much record a certain pattern or move set, and you can have it on playback for the second player. And these are all really great features. Now, when it comes to tutorials and the games teaching you how to play competitively, most of these newer games, AAA titles, they generally have very, very poor tutorials to help you get to anything better than just like doing a few basic things, right? Shout outs to games like Killer Instinct. Of course, those games, there are some games out there that do a really good job with tutorials, and Guilty Gear, Guilty Gear Xrd and the game that's trending right now, Unist. Those games have really good training stuff. They explain like everything from the most basic to like the crazy advanced stuff. So there are games out there that are doing that. It seems like some of these AAA titles that are like, mega sellers, like they generally don't have as good tutorials. But then if you think about a lot of these people who are playing these games, most people who ever play these games, they're not trying to do like, max damage punishes and stuff like that. So I can kind of see why, some of these developers might not prioritize that sort of thing. And then there's also the idea that, we don't want to just spoon feed everybody everything. I think there's a little bit of that going on too. I think some developers kind of hide that frame data information. They don't want it to be like in the games, even though people will figure it out eventually and make an app. But they won't put that like directly in the games on purpose because it makes it so it takes a little bit longer to figure out the game, right? So I think they like to keep that there to keep the longevity of the game, as long as possible.
I'm curious about this because coming from an an RTS background, there's not a lot of RTS games, obviously, and not a lot of good ones. There's a lot of really horrible ones. I feel like fighting games, it's the opposite. That feels like there's just a ton of great fighting games. In my opinion, I've always felt like fighting games, as far as competitive multiplayer goes, it's the most mapped out, and in some ways mastered multiplayer mode that there is. I feel like we're still figuring stuff out with FPS games like this Battle Royale mode.
Yeah.
It's now kind of taking over everything. I think there's not a ton of MOBAs, so it's kind of hard for me to say. Besides Dota 2 and League of Legends, there's not a lot more. I guess there's Heroes of the Storm as well, which isn't doing great. Fighting games, there's just a ton.
Yeah.
In RTS, we have StarCraft 1, StarCraft 2, Warcraft 3, and some other games that are like they're okay. But what I find most interesting about that is like, since I cast both StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, I find that there's a rivalry with the two games, even though they're so similar.
Yeah.
They're both StarCraft. If you're good at one, you can usually easily transfer your skills over to the other and enjoy it. But there's still a rivalry there. And I still meet people in person that have very strong opinions about one or the other, and they usually don't like the other one. Not everybody, but I see it a lot. I don't feel like that's the case overall in fighting games, with the exception of maybe Smash sometimes.
Yeah, so actually, there is kind of there definitely is a rivalries between the different games. Actually, like you were mentioning, there's so many fighting games that it's almost like, I want to make the analogy to like indie music, right?
Yeah.
So fighting games, there's so many fighting games out there and so many underground unknown games that it's almost like the different games that you're into kind of like affect your street cred, right? So like naming your favorite games kind of it kind of tells a little bit about who you are, right?
Yeah.
So there are so many games, and there are like some games like there's this game called Kyanta. I think it's Kyanta 2. I forgot the whole name. A friend showed it to me, but I don't know. You may have seen it at the game bar we go to, but it's basically like this kind of like, it looks like this kind of MS Paint drawn fighting game.
This game.
Yeah, and it's just like this one developer who just kind of made this game out of as a passion project, and it has like a ton of characters, and it's just kind of like sound effects are totally like goofy, and it's just kind of it's when you look at it, it's like, whoa, this thing is like really trippy, and it's like nothing you've ever seen. And that exists, and there are people who play that competitively. And then when people like stream that game, and they have like a little tournament, like the developer goes on to like watch and like like enjoy like his creation being played by these people, and like you have stuff like that, and it goes all the way up to like Street Fighter 5 or Tekken 7, where you have like like these big followings, old legacy games. So there's definitely like kind of like this this feeling I get with a lot of people who look at like all these different fighting games, and they kind of like like some of the more mainstream games. There are some people who will just kind of shit on it because it's like mainstream, and that's too mainstream, and I think it really is similar to the way people's musical tastes work in a lot of ways. And like there's some people who will just like have all these opinions about these games, but then they just don't play these games. They'll have like opinions about them, but they won't actually play the game. So that's another.
I feel
problem.
like that's everybody now on the internet with games. I mean, I've been amazed at how much people have opinions on games that haven't fucking come out yet.
Yeah.
Where I'm
yeah.
like, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
You haven't played it yet. You don't know. But you'll see a mode or some feature and people get worked up. And I understand, if you have something that might change your favorite game, yeah, okay, you have an opinion on it. But that does seem to be the case with a lot of gaming in general. I know that when StarCraft 1 was getting remastered, now as someone who grew up playing StarCraft 1 and competing in it, I'm obviously very excited. But for someone who launched their professional career with StarCraft 2, obviously I love that game too. And I have a blast casting it, and I love that game as well. But I remember all these people coming out of the woodwork and saying, well, this is bad, or it's never gonna take off, or Koreans won't switch over to the remastered. All this, kind of crazy negativity out of nowhere.
Yeah. It's definitely like that in fighting games.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of that. So there's people. I mean, obviously, like there are people who don't like the newer games. They don't like the way they work. They don't like maybe the visuals. And that's fine. There are a lot of people who have legitimate reasons for not wanting to move over to the new games, and there'll be people who are like, just that guy doesn't like change or whatever, and
right.
There'll be this big argument, and and then of course there are people who will just shit on it just for the sake of it, right? And you're talking about how like, there are just people who will just shit on stuff without actually like playing it or trying it, and kind of like this bandwagoning a bit. So there's that too. So I think both of those exist, and there's it's not one way or the other.
This is a broad question, but I'm going to go for it anyways. Do you feel like there's more negativity within gaming communities now, or more pessimism than there was before?
I think more negativity and pessimism.
Or maybe this is just the internet. I don't know.
Yeah, I think more negativity and pessimism is expressed now. You have it now. Now more of it is published because anyone can publish any thought, right? And basically, one of the most shared kind of emotion, one of the emotions that gets people to share the most is negativity, right? Some negative stuff that makes people angry, and stuff that makes people angry is obviously it makes people want to take action and share. And then basically, these algorithms that kind of show what you see on your feed, they understand this. So the algorithms are pulling these kind of negative things up to your timeline, stuff where it's very controversial. People are fighting that stuff.
This is just in social media then?
Yeah, social media in general. And I think, of course people had like opinions and stuff like that. People have tons of opinions, but I think nowadays you're just seeing so much of it, and you see so many people with their opinions that it's now like if you're an opinion leader, back then an opinion leader could write their opinion on a magazine, and that's like a very sacred space. Magazine space is like you have to like get a job, you have to become a writer, you have to get hired, you have to get an editor to approve you, and then that your opinion was there, right? But nowadays, like anybody can just say whatever their opinion is, as long as they have like a camera, which now, guess what? Everyone does. Cell phones, right? Everyone has an HD camera. These cameras do 4K now. There's just so many ways to put media and opinions out there. So that's I think what we're seeing a lot these days, and definitely like negativity does. Sometimes people are really funny with it. So they're like these kind of critical channels and stuff that kind of make it into like a kind of a fun rant. And
that's actually a good point. I feel like the internet's funnier than it's ever been.
Yeah.
There's more access to funny stuff, but there's also
just negative, like not funny and negative.
Just pessimism and bitching. And I mean, we've talked about this, I guess, before the pod, but in general, that we're not huge fans of social media.
Yeah.
I don't use Facebook anymore. I have it just in case I need to log into something so they can steal my information. But
Mark Zuckerberg needs all that.
Yeah, he needs that.
You need to help him out.
But I guess if you're working in gaming, at least in my experience, I think you'd agree, you kind of have to have a Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of it is a double-edged sword, right? I mean, there's great uses for it, and I think it ends up being a love-hate relationship for a lot of people, that have a Twitter account in these industries. And I think everyone kind of deals with it in different ways. And some people like it, and that's cool. Like some people just they kind of get like how to navigate through the waters, and they're able to take the negativity better, and definitely I feel like some people really thrive with that. But generally for me, it's just been kind of like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna open this app and let's see what everyone's pissed off about today. And
yeah, it's weird. It's like now that we have phones, you have this device that's like Pandora's box, and you can open it up and make yourself crazy.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And I mean, it's not that everybody. I mean, I don't get a ton of hate, but it's even the positive stuff can be weird if I have to check it all the time.
Yeah.
And then when you get something negative, and I don't think you and I are even unique in this. I've talked to actually everybody I've talked to. If they start to get negative feedback, it really does affect them.
Yeah. I mean, it's I've actually done a talk about this kind of topic of dealing with some of this negativity on the internet, right? So if you're a YouTuber and you are making content, you are going to run into some negative comments. I mean, if
you mean on the YouTube comment section?
Yeah. Ooh. Could you believe that? On the YouTube comment section,
man,
negative comments in the YouTube comment section.
That is the
man.
That's the armpit of the internet right there. Is YouTube comments?
Yeah. So basically, like YouTube comments is kind of like you see like you see like some comments where it's like there's some guy who is just like just thinking something and then typing it, and then just like in the middle of that sentence he'll just hit enter, and like that's the comment. Like you have like not even full thoughts, and yeah, it can be pretty bad. And
you don't know the age of the person, you don't know what's going on in their life.
Yeah,
you don't know if they're on something. There's so much.
Yeah, definitely.
There, but there's something odd about seeing a cryptic message that someone sent to you, like a note slipped under your door.
Yeah, and there's like some of those messages can be like really like ominous and threatening, and I've gotten some death threats. I think anybody who's done YouTube for long enough, gets like some weirdo with a death threat, and it's like how do you deal with that? You can't just like hide from the world.
I guess
it's like, I mean, some are more credible than others, obviously.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, I mean, either way, that's a bizarre experience. I had some really fucked up experience. This was years ago, but somebody sent me a fake story on Twitter about my brother dying in a drunk driving accident. And I was on the train, and like as I almost fainted. I was so caught, and then I was like, and there's like that 30 seconds where I'm like, oh my god, I got to call my mom. And I thought, wait. This wouldn't be in a story. I would have already known.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I thought, okay, well.
Yeah. But just that for that moment, I mean, it's
and then I mean, I was sick.
Yeah.
For like an hour afterwards, I was just like, whoa, you just, I don't know, fucked up my brain chemistry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's now that being said, I would say the vast majority of my experience on the internet has been pretty positive. People are pretty nice to me, especially now. I think because StarCraft 2 is just old. StarCraft 1's old, so the people that are there are happy to be there. But I mean, you get a lot of crazy shit, especially with new games.
Yeah.
Where kind of the crazy people come out of the woodwork, and they're usually going from title to title.
Yeah.
They're whatever is the new game.
Yeah.
But I've just found, for me, just limiting my interacting with the internet to a certain degree is the best remedy. And dealing with people in reality. Like I almost never tweeted anybody if I know them. I'll text them. Or call them. I always feel like that's healthier than this weird public format.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, hey man, I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I could just text them. I have them on my phone.
Nobody ever talks like the way they do in social media when they're in person. That's just like you would be like you'd be insane. If you were to talk like the way you talk on social media to like your close friends and homies, you would sound like a freaking robot, right? So I actually, like, the more I think about it, the more I realize that on social media, I think it's almost impossible to get a good idea of what someone is like from just the internet. I think it's to know like I've known a lot of these people in the FGC. So what's interesting about the FGC is like it is a community where everyone kind of gathers at these tournaments, and people really meet each other in real life. So what ends up happening in the FGC is oftentimes there are these people with like they don't have many followers or anything, but they're kind of active on Twitter, and they're responding to fighting game people, and there's a good chance that you'll meet these people in person and you'll talk to them, and what you notice is you get to see the Twitter version of people, and you get to see the real life version of people all the time in the fighting game community, right?
Right.
So what I've noticed is, after just interacting with people in person and seeing their Twitter persona for years, I've realized that it's a terrible indicator of what those people are actually like, right?
Yeah, you have no context. I knew this kid. I'm not going to say his name, but he was a guy who was competitive StarCraft 1 player, and I thought this kid was such an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, just the way he talked to me, I thought, man, what is your problem?
Yeah.
And then when I met him, I realized the tone he was using, because he talked almost exactly like he did on the internet, but I realized, it was in jest.
Yeah.
And it was just, he had a very vulgar, blunt way of talking. I thought,
yeah.
Oh, okay. So I didn't get the context of what he was saying, because it was like a dry, crude sense of humor.
Yeah,
but it of course doesn't come across if you're reading it.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
I think is kind of one of the bigger problems in general, with the internet. Well, not a problem, I guess. It's just that's the reality of trying to read text.
Yeah, exactly.
Without an author behind it, saying he said with a grin or a wink or anything like that. On this topic in general, something I've kind of noticed and I've wondered, and I guess you and I both experienced this firsthand, is when you're a content creator, especially in gaming, there's nobody to tell you how to deal with this.
Yeah, that's so my wife gets to hear me complain about this, and she's just feeling bad because it's like I don't know what to say really, and she tries to help, and she's really supportive. She's amazing, right? And so you don't really I don't have a ton of people I can talk to about this, but I do know that other people are kind of they've run into these issues, and I don't know, it's just just it helps a lot to just talk to friends, and sometimes I contextualize the issue as in the talk that one of the talks I did about content creation, I kind of mentioned one of the things that kind of helps me deal with this kind of negativity and these really brutally honest things on the internet where people just say whatever they want. I compared it to kind of being Professor X, in X-Men, right? Because if you think about it,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, if you think about it, he can read everyone's thoughts, right? And then from
Game of Thrones,
if you're just looking on the outside, you're like, whoa, that's a rad power. I'd love to have that power, right? But if you were to actually have that power, most people's thoughts would be really messed
people
up.
People are
and
fucking crazy
and people, and everybody has these really messed up thoughts too, right? So
sure, yeah.
Even the best people you'll meet, they'll just have this one messed up thought, and you'll just be like, whoa. I didn't know that person was capable. But I mean, that's just the way people's minds are. And then on the internet, it's for some reason people just have this tendency to just put what's in their mind onto a written format, and everyone's there to see it. So it's everyone is kind of Professor X. But then why do we think that that's such a good power to have? Why are we sometimes jealous that that this guy can read other people's minds? Well, it's because you can get honest feedback, right? So you can kind of see where people stand with your content and what you can do better. And some of my best feedback has come from people who were not constructive, but were criticizing, right? So I don't want to say this because then people might justify their evilness, right?
I know how to help you, Gerald.
Yeah, but I mean, they're just they'll tell me about something about my audio. I had a lip smacking problem in my second analysis video where I had a lot of saliva noises, And yeah, this guy was really mean about it, and he told me, and I was like, oh shit, okay, damn, okay, I'm fine, and then from then on, I started editing all that out, and I never got that complaint again. But that definitely was an improvement, right, in my content. And so in a certain sense, like it's hard to have thick skin when it's just that many bad comments. Like everyone has a limit, but if you're going to like feel bad, at least like make that feeling bad for a reason, right? And that's to take that comment and see if you can actually do something to make your content better. And then if you keep on improving your content, well, then it doesn't matter because you're doing great, right? It's like, cool, like, okay, that guy hurt my feelings or whatever, but my content's better now, so and I don't even care about that guy, so thanks for the free advice, I guess.
Yeah, I guess there's got to be a way to do it right, and there's definitely people that are doing it wrong, because I guess you could call it like social media psychological hygiene. There's people. I mean, I've been out with people who cannot get off fucking Twitter.
Oh, okay.
They're there all the time, and they're taking photos of their food. I do feel like there's like a kind of social hygiene, a hygiene that you have to have with social media psychologically if you're going to use it. Because I've been with people that are on Twitter all day. They're checking Twitter. They're tweeting at everybody, even when they're out with friends.
Yeah.
Which is always weird. They're constantly having to share what they're eating, what they're doing. And, nobody cares that. I mean, unless you're doing like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't need to tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Thousands of people this, but I think one of the best ways to handle stuff like that is just to limit how much you take it in. And then what I do for feedback is I have people that I just trust that kind of work in the same industry.
Yeah.
Or people that watch my stuff that I can appreciate their feedback. Because sometimes for me, I've gotten feedback where I've tried to implement it and then I get bad reviews and I realize, oh, okay, that was just one person.
Yeah.
Who was trying to kind of tailor me to what they thought I should be doing when the rest of the viewers are more comfortable with that.
Yeah, there's definitely bad feedback as well.
Yeah, and it can be hard to parse that too.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, when it comes to social media, the way I've kind of dealt with it is I just put a child lock on my social media.
Oh, really?
I have an app. I think it's called Antisocial that lets you put a certain amount of minutes that you're allowed to be on that particular platform per day, right? So I have a thing for Twitter where like after I think mine's like 30 minutes a day. I don't want to go over 30 minutes a day on Twitter, and yeah, like after that time runs out, like I'm like, all right, I can't use Twitter anymore for the rest of the day. Now sometimes I need to look at DMs if someone's in town and
right.
look at the messages, and I'm like an exception, but yeah, it's actually been really nice because it's amazing when you do that lock, like, you put yourself at 30 minutes a day, you're amazed at how much you actually go back to the app forgetting that you're now locked out. Like I'll be locked out, right? And then I'll hit Twitter just out of habit, like 10 more times the rest of the day without even like, and this is after me having this app for a long time. So it really shows how these algorithms and stuff, they really get you. These companies are trying to get as much of your attention on their app as possible, right? And like our brains are no match for these like expensive, super advanced algorithms and stuff like that, right?
There's been studies as well that I don't know how true this is, but I have heard this, that you can only have about 150 people that you're kind of close to.
Oh yeah, Dunbar's number.
Dunbar's number. Thank you.
Yeah.
That can be your girlfriend, your wife, your best friend, or your friend that owns a bakery that you see once every 3 months.
Yeah.
But it's hard to surpass a certain number, and one of the things I find interesting when you get to a large number of people on social media is that suddenly people are interacting with you that you have no connection with at all. The connection really is just one way.
Yeah.
They consume your content and they're part of your life, but you simply put could not be part of their life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I don't generally tweet back at anybody anymore, unless it's someone who I haven't talked to in a long time.
Yeah.
And they tweet at me, and I have no other way to get back to them. I'll like a lot of tweets, but I've just found it's. And I see every tweet that people send to me.
Yeah.
But I can't possibly tweet back at all those people.
Yeah.
And try to kind of maintain some kind of a relationship. But I always wonder if that's another factor with social media that kind of strains us, is that I don't think you're supposed to know that many people or be close to that many people. And I guess that's kind of just the day and age we live in now, you know?
Yeah, it kind of started with Facebook, with the idea of friends, right? They actually just called it friends on Facebook. Like, how many friends do you have? So, you know, for the first time, people can say, I have 1,000 friends. You know, like I have literally 1,000 friends on this software platform called Facebook. And, you know, it's true. You could know 1,000 people, but, you know, of those people, there are definitely going to be people that it's going to be awkward when you go down, if you met them at a dinner table or something, and, you know, you barely know this person, and it's going to be, you know, you're not going to be like, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, or you can have it where you meet somebody who follows you on Twitter, and maybe you've tweeted back and forth, and they'll come up to you and start talking to you like they know you.
Yeah.
And you'll realize, does this happen to you where someone hasn't quite introduced themselves or has assumed that...
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's happened to me, too, where I'm like, I don't... And then you say, sorry, who are you?
Yeah.
we tweeted back and forth, I think.
Yeah.
Have we met in person? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see, like, kind of the confusion, because sometimes, you know, you spend a lot of time, you know, on, you know, consuming content.
Yeah.
And, you know, at any given point in time, I guess, you know, probably more so for you than me, or I guess it'd be the same for us. At any moment in time, someone's listening to us talking, and it's not this podcast. There are people hearing us talk on, you know, on YouTube and you know, a bunch of other platforms, and it's kind of weird because, you know, the idea that you get to talk to so many people at the same time, you know, that's a media thing, right? Without media, you wouldn't have been able to do that. So
especially for what we do, which, even though, you know, there's your videos on YouTube get a ton of hits. I have great reach to get all these people, but it's only because of the internet and because of the fact that we can get access to all these people more easily. There's no way 30, 40 years ago we could have the content that we're making and put it on like channel 13 or something at 5 o'clock at night and get the same kind of following.
It's like the writer, the editor who, you know, the writer who has to get through the editor with like an opinion on like a game, right? In magazines, it's like, yeah, that's gone. So that actually, in that sense, you know, social media, the internet, that, you know, is totally good for people who are making this kind of content, right? So this is why we can't completely hate Twitter, right? Because it's still like it's one of those outlets where we can, you know, reach out to a large audience, right? And so it's. Yeah, I guess the best way to describe it is it's just kind of like a love-hate relationship, right? I mean, you can put positivity on Twitter as well. So, like, you know, I said like negativity is kind of one of the top shared emotions, or not, maybe not negativity, but anger, right?
Yeah,
which is kind of a negative emotion. But also like another metric that another thing that they measured was awe, right? People being amazed, and that was actually really close to anger, and so you can reach a lot of people and get shared a lot because you just blew someone's mind, right? About something, and that's what explains a lot of these science channels, you know, like Vsauce and, you know, CGP Grey. These people are out there blowing people's minds, and then they're getting shared for that reason. That's super positive, right? I mean, you know, these creators are, you know, spreading awareness of like science and technology and you know, talk about social issues, and they make it kind of fun and exciting, and so there's like a positive aspect to all this kind of social media craziness as well. So I guess the question is, you know, how do you deal with this kind of newer age? And I feel like the young kids, you know, who just kind of grew into this, they're the ones that are really just able to, like, you know, kind of get it, right? Just
they get it, or they're getting fucked up by it.
So
well, I don't know. You know, this is something I wanted to ask you while we're on the topic of social media, because, I mean, never mind you and me. I've seen pros just in complete emotional, just wreckage.
Yeah.
You know, they'll lose a match, and they'll immediately get on Twitter, and then there's all these psychos and trolls that are mocking them, or tearing them down. I wonder if maybe in, you know, 20 years we're going to have some kind of, or we're going to be teaching in school how to handle social media, or something like that. Because
that's a pretty.
I mean, there's definitely particularly in competitive gaming, an issue where you have some of the most talented minds in the world with nobody, no big brother, no big sister, no adults in the room helping them manage this. Even though I think it's great that I can contact a family member right now with a box in my pocket, my phone.
Yeah,
that was unthinkable, a few decades ago. But at the same time, you also are letting in a lot of kind of weirdos or just upsetting thoughts and people bothering you. I wonder if down the road we're going to have some kind of system in place to kind of teach people how to handle this, because I am seeing a lot of young people that are getting that are very talented, that are traveling the world and having all these great experiences, but the byproduct of that is them having to grapple with social media or reading about themselves on forums, all that stuff.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting because, like, with any new medium, there's going to be a lot of changes in the way people communicate and interact. And if you want to go way back, to when like print was kind of like a recent thing, apparently from what I heard, like people reading novels, like books, was kind of one of those things where like, oh wow, these kids are now reading these books and now they're not going outside because they're just putting their eyes on the paper, constantly being quiet to themselves. So whenever there's like a new form of media, there is a lot of skepticism, and I don't know, that doesn't mean that the way this kind of social media experiment is going now is necessarily healthy. But I think there's going to be a time of adjustment, I think. And it might be that this kind of social media, culture is kind of adjusting right now as we speak, right? So, there's of course, there's the outrage culture, like, look how, look how not racist I am, tweet or something that just gets like, that just gets like so much. And it's like, yeah, cool, I agree with that and stuff. But
you don't have to be very brave to say that.
But yeah, you don't even have, but it's just like these kind of like posts and tweets, I think people are starting to realize, like, okay, now the currency of like saying that is now starting to get, lower because like so many people have done it, right?
Right.
So what ends up happening is, I think is, if I'm optimistic, these kinds of like this kind of social media culture is kind of like getting a little bit more tame, because people are now like, they kind of like predict like, like I want attention posts, and these, if you do it too much, like people will start calling you out, right? So it's as people get more used to this format, I think people are just, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I do feel like over time people will start, getting better at it.
I guess every generation has their fear too. I mean, when we were growing up, a lot of people were very worried because young versions of you and me were playing games where you could kill people. And honestly, I actually kind of get the concern if you didn't know anything about games. The idea that a young person is going in a simulation and murdering people and doing this and that. But, if you grow up with it, I say, okay, well, I'm not violent at all.
Yeah. But yeah.
I don't have a mean bone in me, but I get the concern with that. And, I mean, before that, what was it, like heavy metal music?
Yeah, heavy metal music in the 80s.
In the 70s, it was young people smoking marijuana. There was a whole scare about that. And so... yeah, I mean, perhaps we're going to be wrong, and this will just self-adjust, the whole social media thing. A lot of young people are not on Facebook as much anymore.
Yeah, like Facebook
doing
stopped,
Snapchat and Instagram, stuff like that.
Yeah, Facebook stopped getting popular when like their parents were able to get on and look at their pictures of them getting drunk, and it's like, oh, that's not a platform I want to be on. Like that's. It's
a funny thing too, because it. I remember being in college, so I got into social media. I was on MySpace.
Oh yeah, I remember MySpace.
Way back in the day.
Yeah. Man, MySpace.
Yeah.
I feel old.
Yeah, I feel very old. I don't know where Tom is now, but he's probably doing all right.
Yeah,
the guy that
Tom
owns MySpace.
Yeah, I think he sold it to like Rupert Murdoch or something for like way too much money, and like somebody on social media was like, you loser, your MySpace went nowhere. He's like, yeah, I'm rich.
Oh yeah, he's loaded now.
Yeah,
but like. Having Facebook, I remember specifically the moment where suddenly my professors were trying to add me.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm getting aunts and uncles that I haven't seen in a long time, and then there's that weird moment where you're going, oh, I can't
Yeah.
I can't have this photo of me playing beer pong. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, I could, but this is almost
I'd rather
too,
not.
Yeah, I feel too exposed
Yeah.
to too many people that I had no interest in showing, you know,
Yeah.
that I partied in college on a Saturday night.
Yeah, that's why I like Snapchat and like these, these platforms where, they have like fleeting moments are kind of like,
Yeah.
the newer social media, like the social media where like the evidence is kind of erased. Of course, it's not completely erased. Nothing on the internet's ever fully erased, right? But
Right.
but for all intents and purposes, you have this kind of more social media starts to evolve towards like the different audiences and stuff. So
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy time now because I think to what you were saying before, I think it probably is self-adjusting, just the way that apps have changed to be not as permanent, or the fact that Instagram is less about it's more about, in a way, photography and memes and showing an image, and less about, I guess, going on a diatribe. I've seen so many people self-immolate on Facebook. Twitter's another one that I've always been amazed by. And Twitter I find to be a very handy tool, but I've seen so many people that I work with just say things where I think, oh, no. You just said that to everybody who has the internet?
yeah.
That was unnecessary.
That's why there's the delete function, right?
Right.
And like, I mean, just today, like someone tweeted at me about something, and I think it was about a tweet that I made, a retweet that I made, and I kind of used like a term, a little bit unclear. And he responded, it's like, oh, well, that's not that thing that you mentioned. That's actually not. It's this thing called a read, right?
Right.
And and I was like, and then I just immediately, my reaction was to be like, define reads, period. And I was like, wait a minute, that sounds really like
Aggro.
hostile, right?
Yeah.
So I deleted it, and I was like, oh, how do you define this then? And I realized like man, like. That could just escalate into something, So, yeah, that's the social media. Yeah.
If I could shift gears here, I wanted to ask you about this, and I love fighting games. I love watching fighting game tournaments. I've done some fighting game stuff show-wise in the past, but I wanted to pick your brain on this because I feel like you're going to have a much better idea than me. And as an outsider, I'm really curious about this. Kind of the state of Smash Brothers. Melee is this force that seems to be impossible to kill. But
Okay.
it is such and I'm not saying I want it to go away or anything like that. I'm actually impressed with just the staying power it has. It reminds me a lot of StarCraft 1 in Korea. And then you have the situation now with the newest Smash is out, Smash Ultimate.
Yeah.
And Nintendo, I guess, is sort of pushing some competitive scene, if I'm not mistaken. What is your take in general about the future of Melee, the future of Smash Brothers as a competitive mode, and kind of Nintendo's role in that? And I know that's like a really big question that I'm asking, but if you could kind of dive into that, I would love that.
Yeah. So generally, like, I say, like, Melee is kind of it's a very old game that is one of those games that's never really been patched. Of course, there's the PAL version of Melee, which has a couple of changes, but by far most people play the NTSC version, right? So it's one of those games where...
Sorry, just when you say NTSC, just for the people that don't
know.
Oh,
NTSC is basically the American version,
right?
Just to make it simple. But American and Japanese. But the PAL version was a European version, meant for their TV systems, that they were able to like adjust a few things. Like there's like a minor patch that made the game a little bit different. But other than that, like people are playing the same game that they played when they first got it, right? And the modern trend is when a game comes out is to just patch it a lot, like nerfs, buffs, have like this patch culture, and that has advantages and disadvantages, right? And people are going to be divided on what they like, what they prefer, right? So Melee is kind of like maybe like a like Brood War. I imagine Brood War stopped getting patches after a certain point, right?
Brood War was patched. Melty, can you look this? I think the last patch was 1999. Now in remastered, they gave it a facelift, and you could rebind hotkeys, and they've changed just a few little things to make it more operational.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, for all intents and purposes, I believe it was 19 years. By the way, we're finally going to get to use this. For everybody listening,
wow.
we got the laptop that Melty's on hooked up to the big screen TV so we can look stuff up. I believe it was 1999 it was patched. So yeah, it wasn't changed for about 19 years. We'll get confirmation on that in a second.
Yeah, but the game is pretty much the same. It's not like they changed all these properties since then, right? It's not
Right.
like they. So there's kind of two ways that people prefer games, competitive games. One is where they don't mess with the game. They just they release the game, and it's kind of it kind of lets the competitive players figure out the game for a long time, right? It's a bummer whenever you learn a character or learn a race or whatever, you spend all your time on it, and then the developer is just like, all right, that thing that you were working on like for 2 months, like that technique, that's gone now. That's like, sorry. And so when you have like this patch culture, one of the downsides is it's almost like a lottery of like, okay, so what? I hope this company likes my character because I don't want my character to be nerfed. And one of the reasons why Tokido really likes Akuma is Capcom seems to kind of favor Akuma in terms of nerfs and buffs.
He's very large in the image of the brand.
Exactly.
Of Street Fighter, where like anytime you see like a poster, obviously Ken and Ryu as well, but you see a lot of Akuma.
Yeah, and Akuma kind of has this. Akuma's notorious for being powerful. That's part of his character.
By the way, it was 1999. Okay, so
we had
about 18, 19 years of just StarCraft 1. No adjustments made.
Okay, so that's one kind of school of thought, right? It's you have this game that is kind of like is getting no more patches. It's kind of done.
By the way, this is the opposite in StarCraft 1. All the units that Blizzard liked were all the awful units.
Oh,
it was
okay.
like the Ghost. They just were trying so hard to get that Ghost to be used. The Ghost is pretty good in StarCraft 2, but it was a lot of units they were very excited about that just turn out to not be easy to utilize.
Okay, maybe they're just not fundamentally flawed or something. Okay, but anyways, yeah. So like there's some people really like that fact where they can just kind of figure this game out and not have to worry about all these changes that are coming. But then in modern games like in Street Fighter V, there's like one or two patches like every year, sometimes more. And what ends up happening is patch day comes, right? And everyone's on their phones. And they're like, okay, I hope my character's not useless now, right? And that can be a bummer. But then on the plus side, it does bring like a freshness to the game, right? So there's some of these really old games that don't get patched and upgraded for a long time. They're always in kind of this danger of like getting stale, like getting figured out, right?
Yeah, I guess it's in different parameters as well that you're operating in, right? Like with StarCraft 1. In RTS in general, and I think one advantage RTS has over a lot of games, and I think first-person shooters have this as well, is maps.
Mm-hmm.
We can just change the map, and then the game's changed. So a lot of StarCraft 1 was, in a way, inadvertently being patched by the map makers.
Okay.
When there seemed to be some problem like, Terran can build too many turrets in the middle of the map and make too many mines and Protoss can't get out, well, then they'll make a map where you can't build in the middle of the map.
Okay.
But I feel like particularly in Street Fighter, unless I'm mistaken, there's no.
Yeah, it's just the characters and all the maps are the same.
The map is an aesthetic, right?
Yeah, it's just an aesthetic.
Even the size, right? There's no level.
Yeah,
it's actually wider, right?
Yeah, it's just one like the stage is like one size usually for every stage, and then of course like sometimes like I think in Third Strike, like I think Gil's stage, the final boss stage, is like actually like a little smaller, or maybe it was bigger, but But generally, yeah, I think they probably banned that stage in tournament. But yeah, like the stage size is just an aesthetic usually, and not in Tekken. With Tekken, there's like breakable walls and stuff that can act as combo
floor
extenders.
Can break too, right?
Yeah, floor can break. But yeah, in Street Fighter is just the characters, and that's those are the things that are getting affected big time. So it's almost personal too, right? It's like whenever you see the patch notes, it's about your character, and you're like, oh my god, how dare they do that to my character, and how dare they do this, and then you look at the other characters, you're like, oh, that character got buffed, and sometimes you're like, oh, that character got nerfed, oh, too bad, you don't use the character, so you're happy about it. And so I think one problem that can come from that kind of culture is there are sometimes you see these campaigns on Twitter that attack certain characters, like that character's way too powerful, and like everyone will just kind of dogpile on a certain character, and then nobody knows what's going on at these companies, right? But they might listen to some of this feedback and decide to just destroy that character because there's a lot of campaign of hate towards that character. And if they are doing that, then what that means is part of the new meta in your game is how good are you a Twitter warrior at making campaigns against, how much you hate something, right?
There's also this unseen thing of data farming. Mm-hmm. I remember this is the person will remain nameless, but I was talking to somebody who was in charge of StarCraft 2, and both Artosis and me were saying, a lot of people are saying that this race, I'm going to keep this ambiguous so people don't freak out.
Yeah.
That this race, the late game, people are saying it's overpowered, but in our opinion and experience, it's not. We were talking to him. He said, oh, no, you're right, because we have the numbers on that.
Yeah.
This race does fine after 15 minutes.
Yeah.
People who are complaining online don't know what they're talking about, because at the highest level, the game goes on for this amount of time and this race wins. So those people are wrong. I'd be curious how that works, because I would imagine there has to be data, like just massive amounts of data collected on all the online matches as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think at one point there was there was a patch for Street Fighter V where it was kind of interesting because there's a character, Cammy, who is already seen as like very strong, and she got buffed like a lot, and everyone was like, what the heck is going on? She was already super strong, and they gave her a new move and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think they would give her like an air throw and stuff like that, just like giving this character all this stuff, and people were kind of confused because it's like, okay, this is the character everyone deemed overpowered. Why'd you do that? And then I think some people looked up the data of online results. And it turns out that at the casual levels of play, which is how most people play Street Fighter V, because they're more casuals than competitive, obviously. At the casual levels, Cammy was losing like the most. So Cammy was actually doing really bad, and it makes a lot of sense because Cammy.
But you're saying at the casual levels.
Yeah, at the casual levels. So
that's scary whenever you patch
online.
Anything on
Exactly.
On results of low tier play.
Exactly.
With all due respect to those people, no one gives a fuck. If you can't play at the lowest level, I mean, that's scary.
Yeah.
Ooh, I got chills.
Exactly.
Just now when you said that.
So people were kind of like, I mean, nobody knows exactly what Capcom was thinking, when they made these patches, but people were like,
that concept of patching from the bottom up,
is
I feel like just.
It is.
That is like a bizarro world of fixing games for competitive play.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying, but you can kind of see why a company would do that, because if you think about it, casuals are people too, and they play. They're probably more. They're way more casual players, definitely. And if you just cater towards like the competitive players, they're gonna feel left out, right? So. I think, but of course, it's a problem when you start listening to the casuals complaining about the game who barely know how the game functions. Then you start getting into problems. Now,
there's also this. I mean, I think this is a larger problem in games in general, is trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator of player. And I'm not trying to be. In this sense, a gatekeeper.
You're an elitist.
An elitist scumbag, or anything like that. But, these people who... Do you want any more tea, by the way?
Oh, no, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, just let us know. We can get you some more if you need some more. There's a huge problem with trying to appease the lowest skilled players, assuming that these are people that actually want to invest in the game. Because, in my experience, the people who complain the most about any game are the most likely to switch to the next game, find out that they're horrible at that game, be genuinely confused at why they're bad at that, because secretly they should be the best, but it's actually the publisher's fault and the game's fault and the the controller's fault and the internet's, the latency's the issue. Those people are going to go away anyways.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it would just seem like a liability that at the highest, that whether publishers like it or not, the players that become the best at their game ultimately become the experts, inadvertently become the, how do you say this? The avatars for the vitality of the game, the advertisement for the game. If you have one of your top pros say, and I'm not saying Capcom's doing this. I actually think they do a good job with their games. But let's say they say Capcom's fucking up and this game sucks.
Yeah.
That seems like a more of a PR disaster than if you have one of your top 8 players in the world saying that.
Yeah.
Who probably knows the game almost better than anybody out there. Than a dude who, can't do a combo.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of, I guess, I don't know how these companies work or anything, but I'm sure they have their they have their cost benefit analyses, and they try to figure it out. Nobody really knows what's going on, and I'm sure it's kind of a big web of it's kind of like this big complex thing with all these moving parts, I'm sure, in these companies.
Yeah.
and how they work. So I don't really know exactly how they do it, but definitely there is that fear of you don't if you're into the competitive aspects of these games, you want it the competitive players in mind, right? And so yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tiring also to kind of like look at these patches and results and try to make sense out of it. And another thing is, at the end of the day, what ends up happening is you just have to play the game and get good. Like there's no so there's a weird, it's kind of a conundrum, right? So on one hand, you're like, okay, why are they making the game like this? And you want to talk about legitimate like criticisms about the game, right? But then at the same time, if you do that too much, then you're just a whiner, Yeah. And if you're a whiner, that's not a good champion. That's not a good mentality to have. So what do you do? And when Season 1 came out of Street Fighter V, one of the big kind of blow-ups was when people found out it had 8 frames of input lag. And in a fighting game, that's like...
You've got a great video on this, by the way.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I made it, because it was kind of a big deal. But most people, like if you're a casual player, you don't care about a few extra frames of input. Like, you're not going to notice.
Yeah, to a casual player, you might be laughing at what this even is, because you don't realize the gravity of something like this in an actual competitive setting.
Yeah, and 8 frames of lag doesn't. Yeah,
can you just explain for everybody listening what that
means
here?
So basically, so input lag is whenever you press a button on your controller, how long it takes for your attack to register on the screen. So as you can imagine, that's extremely important for something like a fighting game where like every frame counts. And to give you an idea of how important a single frame of lag can make, a big thing in the Street Fighter 4 days was, are they going to have Street Fighter played on PS3 or Xbox 360? And there was only 1 frame of input lag difference, but every pro player you talk to, they definitely know the difference, and they have to time everything differently, and that was just 1 frame. So basically, when Street Fighter V came out,
real quick, how is that it came out on? Is that a problem with the hardware?
Yeah, so there's
on the PlayStation, or is there some kind of conspiracy theory where Xbox brought Capcom into a cigar smoke-filled room and said, "Give us 1 extra frame"? I mean, that seems so strange to me when you have clearly that is so impactful.
Yeah,
to have the same thing on 2 different consoles, and then clearly one is only playable for competitive purposes.
Exactly. So I think like for during the Street Fighter 4 days, like it was like 1 frame of lag, so people were just kind of like, okay, maybe that's just like a system architecture thing. Okay, it's just 1 frame, so maybe there's something going on with how the consoles work, right? But then when Street Fighter 5 came out, and it had 8 frames of input lag, that was about 3 more frames than the previous good version of Street Fighter 4, and this this was kind of a shock to a lot of people because it was like, this is like a new level of input lag in these fighting games. And so the big problem with that was, of course, you can still play it competitively and everything, but if you were a player that basically was like, man, I don't like this input lag, it's terrible, and you're a competitive player, you're gonna seem like a whiner, right? And so people who complain, it's funny, the internet was like railing at Capcom for having 8 frames of input lag, like it was a meme, right? They're just making fun of the game, as being like this goofy, like, laggy game. And then at the same time, these same people they'd be criticizing these players for mentioning it, right? So they'd be like, it's like, how do you feel about this game? They're like, oh, well, like, I can't be as reactive because there's 8 frames of input lag now. And I think one of the players, when he was on record saying that, like, he just everyone blew up at him for like, no, now you're whining about the game, you're making excuses, like, and then whenever some player is very reactive and doing really well and playing reactively, they're like, oh, looks like this player can do it, why can't you? So it kind of became the worst of, like, the internet, right? It's like they're like, this 8 frames is so stupid, you guys are so terrible for having this 8 frames. And then when the player's like, yeah, this 8 frames sucks, it's making my play, like, it's messing up my play, then they get mad at the players. People get mad at the players. So, like, it's like, who can talk about this? So one of the reasons why I made a video on the 8 frames topic was I wanted to increase awareness of how important this can be and how it can affect the games. And I'm not a competitive player. I can talk about the 8 frames and why that can hamper the gameplay. And no one's gonna be like, well, Gerald's just making excuses for his, like no, I'm not like a pro player or anything, so I could do that. So I know that's one of the big problems with being a top player and criticizing the game, even if it's a legit criticism. It just never looks good, right?
On that note, actually, I'm sorry, can we pause for a minute? I have to pee so badly.
Go for it.
Sorry. Okay, we're going to cut for a quick break here. I had to go to the bathroom really, really badly. So while we're here on this short break, quick plug for the Patreon. These mics, the laptop, the mic arms, all this stuff, it's pretty expensive, but with good quality stuff, we're able to make a good quality podcast. One of our Patreons, am I saying this right? Mike Kernicki?
John Kernicki.
Oh, shit. John Kernicki. Sorry about that, John. I thought your name was Mike. I don't know how I made that. You know what it was? I was talking about microphones.
Yeah.
That must have been what it did. So he's been donating $100 a month. So really, thank you so much, John Kernicki, for supporting this. And we're actually, what are we going to get? We're getting Cloud Lifters soon?
Yeah, we're getting Cloud Lifters CO1 to help improve the quality of the show.
Well, that's excellent. So, right now, the money that we're getting, first of all, I really appreciate everybody who's been supporting us on Patreon. If you have any extra cash and want to throw it our way, we really appreciate it. For now, we actually just did it a minute ago. We ordered the Cloud Lifters. They should be coming tomorrow. So hopefully in podcast 4 we sound a little bit different. Let us know what you think. And I guess that does it for our break. Should we just go back to the Gerald podcast?
I think we should.
All right, let's do it. We're going back. Speaking of the way that people react on the internet, whether someone's complaining about the game or whatever it is, people, different cultures react to different behaviors.
Sure.
And one thing about fighting games, in particular, is that it's oftentimes a clash of Eastern and Western cultures.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's different things that are celebrated, and this is true in StarCraft as well. Is like we've got players like MC who he talks a lot of shit. He's really funny. Mm-hmm. Europeans and North Americans, they love him.
Yeah.
Koreans, in this case, not so much.
Okay.
They think he should be more respectful. Is this also an issue with a lot of the Japanese players or the Korean players? And I feel like the Korean players, correct me if I'm wrong, they strike me as a little bit more lively than some of the Japanese players, a little bit less reserved, but there's definitely a difference here. Do you feel like that pans out over the internet as a whole, how people perceive these guys, where in some cases this guy might be looking respectful and honorable in one culture, in another culture he's being looked at as timid or being pushed around. On the converse side, you've got a guy who's loud. He's making jokes. He might be looked at as a great character, someone I want to root for. He's funny. And on the other end of that, people would look at that and think this guy's an asshole. He's got no respect.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's actually good that you mentioned that, because I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about this StarCraft player named Larva, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm not, the most well-versed in StarCraft, but I did a little bit of research, and, this is basically a Korean player who was at a tournament. It was like a tournament in the West.
I was hosting it. It was a Zotac Cup in Los Angeles.
Yeah. It was in the States, right?
I think I know what you're talking about. Is this where he put his foot on the mouse? So this was against this is in StarCraft 1. Larva, big streamer out here in Korea on Africa TV, good Zerg player, against Legend, who is a old school Chinese Protoss player.
Mm-hmm.
Now keep in mind, Zotac is can you look up who owns Zotac? It's a Chinese company. I just can't remember.
Yeah, I think they made my graphics card.
Yeah,
I know that.
They've got great equipment, by the way. That's not a sponsor, but they had this invitational, and of course they invited Legend down there because he's a well-known Chinese player.
Yeah.
This is all done in LA again, but Larva, as he was beating Legend, put his foot on the mouse.
Yeah.
This turned out to be one of the top 10 most viewed clips on Twitch.
Yeah, that's how I found out about it.
Yeah.
It was blown out. It was blown up.
Oh, it's headquartered in Hong Kong. Okay. Huh?
Oh, Macau. Okay.
Macau.
Okay. To be more.
Oh, it's based in Macau. Okay. Anyways, obviously heavily Chinese influence there. But yeah, he put his foot on the mouse, and on the Western side, everybody thought this was hilarious. People thought this was really funny.
Yeah.
And what a character. And by the way, it wasn't like he microed mutas with his foot or something incredible. I mean, he just put his foot on the mouse, and while the guy was already dead.
Yeah, he was showboating, right?
He was showboating, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Chinese internet blew the fuck up. So yeah, just to phrase the story. So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, I kind of saw that, and like it was kind of, I was a little bit confused because it's like, you have these like Korean players that are often seen as like really reserved, right? Like you were just mentioning, and then he finally does something that's like kind of like, shows that other side, and then he's getting blown up, right? But I guess it's blown up from a different side. I guess you can't really please everyone, all the time, right? It's that old adage, right? So I saw that incident, and I don't know too much about like StarCraft culture and stuff like that, but that immediately made me think about the FGC, right? So in the FGC, you see like this kind of like showboating and showing off, and you see taunting as well, right?
Right.
It's like really common, and you see it all the time, and I even made a video about it, right? So one of the big things in Street Fighter V was Knuckle-Doo. He's this really good. At the time, he was playing Guile and Mika, and he's a really good player that, for some reason, at a certain point, he just started taunting like his opponents, like in like high stakes matches and like grand finals or top 8. And
was this by verbally taunting? Was he doing a dance?
Oh, okay,
or was it something his character was doing?
Yeah, so in the game, there are multiple ways to taunt. There's a taunt function. So in Street Fighter V, you press all 6 buttons at the same time. Your character can do like a little taunt animation, right? And for a little moment, you can't control your stick while they're doing the animation, right? And but there's another way of taunting, and he kind of popularized this taunting in Street Fighter. If you played any first-person shooters, Halo maybe, you probably know about teabagging, right?
Right.
So generally people before
Can you explain what teabagging is though?
So teabagging basically is like in a first-person shooter, if you like kill somebody, you can go over their corpse and just mash crouch. Just keep on pressing crouch, which will make your character kind of look like they're repeatedly sitting on the dead body, right? And that's like a very disrespectful
thing to do. Dropping your balls on them.
Yeah, basically, teabagging, right? So basically, what Knuckle-Doo did was he would do that to this Chinese player. So here's another example of of a Chinese player getting disrespected like this in the game, and it was Xiao Hai. And I know NuckleDu really respects Xiao Hai as a player. He thinks he's a really good player, and the reason he said that he was doing that was because he knew that it would get under Xiao Hai's skin and make him like mess up and play worse. And apparently it was working because he would win, right, doing this. But of course, Xiao Hai would get upset, like inside, but he never went on social media. He never, made a big deal out of it afterwards. He shook NuckleDu's hand, afterwards, and just, he was salty that he lost. He was obviously, right. He lost and he got teabagged in the match. Maybe he got a little frustrated, and this happened like. It was like, I think it was just he was doing it to other players, but he would do it the most to Xiao Hai because it worked. And then like there was a tournament where like NuckleDu flew to China, and he did the same to Xiao Hai in China, like and beating him like and teabagging him, right? And it became this thing like and so of course Xiao Hai still didn't really go on social media and blow this up, or nothing really came of it. What did happen? Something did happen though at the end of all this. Xiao Hai, it's not like he liked getting disrespected like that, obviously, but he just started getting better, and he made it a point to defeat NuckleDu and get his revenge, right? And there was an event, E-League. He's been getting teabagged by NuckleDu and losing to him all these tournaments. There's a national televised event, E-League. It's a huge event, right? And basically at that tournament, Xiao Hai got his revenge on NuckleDu, and he teabagged him back, and he eliminated him from the tournament. And basically it was on his birthday, on NuckleDu's birthday, yeah. So after he did that, like they did like the E-League thing. They had like a little message. They recorded a message with Xiao Hai, a post-match message, and I think it was when NuckleDu had to go home because he got eliminated, right? And basically, like, it was a clip of Xiao Hai. Basically, suddenly he speaks English now.
Oh yeah.
Basically saying like, oh, hi NuckleDu, are you home now? Saying it from the tournament, because he eliminated him, and everyone's like, wow, this guy planned his revenge and he got it on his birthday. He teabagged him back in the tournament, and he learned English just so he can trash talk afterwards. Like, he never really spoke English before that. So it's like, whoa, this is crazy. This is like the ultimate revenge, right? And of course the FGC, they're loving this, like this was this, revenge thing coming. So so that's kind of one example of a similar thing that happened in the FGC. I mean, there's bitter rivalries, there's bitter things and stuff like that, but it's definitely not. I don't know. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
The Larva one was weird. First of all, Larva, I absolutely love the guy. He's really charming. There's a couple taboos about using your feet, and as a sign of severe disrespect in some Asian cultures.
Sure. I'm sure there's a whole load of baggage.
I
don't know really much about.
There's also some. I think at that time there was something geopolitically going on with China and Korea.
Yeah, on top of everything
as well.
Right?
I think there've been some complaints of tourism here, Chinese tourism.
Oh yeah.
At the time there was I think there was a ban on cosmetic products in China coming from Korea. So things were already kind of tense. Larva was viewing this as it's an American tournament.
Yeah.
This is an American audience. I'm going to play it up to Americans. And Larva's already known for kind of being a shit talker.
Okay.
And then you had the fact that I think the Chinese players, Legend being a considerably like old school player, it was like, why are you beating up on a grandpa?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where Larva's like a young, modern player.
Okay.
So I think he probably viewed it as sort of, this is in good jest, but then having a Chinese company, or at least a company with chock full of Chinese staff reading just Chinese internet, panicking that they put this tournament on.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can have, depending on what language you speak, you can see a completely different reaction to the internet.
Oh, yeah.
To something.
I'm sure.
And so there was all this panic there. I remember talking to them and saying, it's fine. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You know what I mean? This was all in jest. But, yeah, it kind of blew up. But, look, I thought it was good TV.
Yeah.
I really had a good time, and he was trying to have a good time. And I think occasionally it's almost comical when you see how much people can overreact to something they weren't really part of.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I mean,
sometimes just these rivalries on that happen, and you don't realize these guys go to the same bar after the tournament and drink together.
Yeah.
And sometimes take the same shuttle to the airport. Meanwhile, you have all these people typing up a storm on Reddit.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't really know what was going on there. I didn't know I didn't know where the tension was and stuff like that. But just from my perspective, from someone who just follows fighting game stuff closely, it's just kind of made me think of that, right? It's there's a lot of trash talking in fighting games. Obviously, there's and then sometimes it can be kind of rough, and but there's definitely culture for it. Like people are kind of what happens in the FGC a lot is you'll see like a beef forming, and the thing is it's valuable. These beefs are valuable, most valuable if they're about the game and skill, right?
Right.
And you don't necessarily want the rivalries where like somebody dated the wrong girl or whatever, that's not as interesting. Like what the FGC likes is whenever somebody's talk shit about somebody's skill level, that's when people get excited. And what ends up happening is these grudge matches form. And in the early days of Dragon Ball FighterZ, it was Goichi and Sonic Fox had this big rivalry thing going, and it was I think Goichi basically said that he said something in Japanese. I don't know if maybe it was in English, but he basically said something like, "I'm gonna go and kill you" or something, and Sonic Fox responded with he responded in Japanese. I don't know how well he said it, but it was like you're already dead or something like that. So they had this rivalry thing going. And it was so hyped up because it's like, okay, these are the best American player and best Japanese player, and they're going to do a 1 to 10 exhibition at the next tournament. And, stuff like that is like, and leading up to it, they're saying more and more stuff, and it just kind of builds up to this kind of big thing. The current grudge match that's going to happen in the FGC, that's kind of big profile, is between Rip, a commentator for Tekken, and he also does Street Fighter. And he's an Evo champion in Tekken like a long time ago, and Ryan Hart. Ryan Hart was at ESGN, the thing.
I love him.
Yeah,
he's great. He's hilarious. I love the guy.
He's an amazing fighting game player. He's an amazing. He plays multiple. He's good at so many games, and basically they were both commentating at the Tekken World Tour Finals 2018. Right, they're in Amsterdam. They're commentating, and at the commentators table, I think Ryan Hart kind of made some comment about Rip's play, and basically it escalated. Like Rip responded, and it got to the point where they're both like arguing about each other's accomplishments, and it got pretty nasty. They were like, it's like like Ryan Hart was talking about his Evo trophy. That he got 1 year for Tekken, and then Rip was like, "Oh, you mean the Evo where he hit the pause button? There was like an Evo where there was like a scandal where one of the players like hit the start button, and then they just ruled that the win." And they started discrediting each other's like accomplishments and stuff. It got to this kind of like, it was like playful banter at first, but it was playful serious.
When is that match happening?
It's gonna happen. It's going to happen this month, I believe. I forget the name of the tournament. It's between Rip and
Ryan Hart.
Yeah, it starts with a D. Might have to look it up on.
We got Melty on it.
Ryan Hart. So Rip and Ryan Hart, yeah.
I think it's H-A-R-T. But
H-A-R-T, but yeah, so. Oh. Ryan Hart.
I think those kind of rivalries are always cool. I was wondering though, like in general, do you feel like players from the East feel more forced to conform behaviorally to the West at some of these tournaments, or when you have players from the West that end up in Japan, do they feel like there's more pressure for them to behave in more of a reserved manner?
So yeah, I mean, I think generally the players kind of want to do things their way wherever they're at, right?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the one way of expressing yourself. So like, it's not like one player will go to a different tournament and act different. I think that was kind of the case with Larva, right? I think in an interview he was like, I felt like, I was in the U.S. and like that's kind of, Americans kind of like that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of Conor McGregor and, all this stuff, right? But just in the FGC, it is true you'll have people like the Western players will do certain things that the Japanese and the Korean players won't, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. There's definitely they express it in different ways. So the way people pop off and stuff like that. So there's definitely like a cultural difference. But yeah, that all that teabagging stuff, like that's something I'd say kind of the Americans kind of popularized during that time. It got to the point where Punk was doing it. He was just teabagging everyone to grand finals and winning everything. He was like, on top of the world during that time. And it was, it was, I made a video about it because of that. There was just all this, and I was thinking like, man, this is kind of a weird thing going on. Like people are disrespecting each other so hard, these days. And it's kind of, it's interesting to hear people saying like, oh, I do it because it gets me hype. It gets me confident. And also, it can damage my opponent mentally. If it works for a second, then it was worth it.
It looks like is it coming up right now? It looks like Melty found it. Is that the correct date?
Yeah, so 13th and 14th of April. Yeah, it's coming up very, very soon.
Shit, I don't know if this podcast is going to be... Oh, no, wait. This podcast will come out the... Yeah, I'm looking at my calendar now. Oh, no, that's sorry, that would be this weekend. Never mind. We'll be long past this, but you can go check that out, the VOD later on.
Yeah, so...
People at home.
So, yeah, this is, Rip versus Reinhardt, and, this is... So this kind of stuff happens in the FGC a lot. A lot of these beefs, and basically because you can kind of it's pretty convenient to doing a first to 10 is like a good way to show who's the better player, and these players are always meeting each other at these events, so it's like you can't, if you're ducking, it's so obvious, right? Because people are just traveling all the time, meeting each other anyways. So So a lot of these kind of grudge matches and stuff happen. Sometimes money matches, $1,000 money matches. They escalate up to $10,000 sometimes. It gets really crazy, and everyone gets excited, and it's just been a part of the FGC for a long time, and still happens today.
I wanted to ask you about Riot Gaming.
Oh,
the possibility, nothing's confirmed yet, but of them making a fighting game. Right now, Riot is sitting on one game, League of Legends. Now, that game is still doing well.
Yeah.
It is still one of the biggest things that there is in the world.
Yeah.
But, of course, no publisher wants to have all their eggs in one basket. Now, I would imagine they're probably making a couple games. I don't know for sure. I don't really know. I'm not close to anybody really at Riot. I know a couple people, but not on a very close level. But there has been rumors about them going into fighting games.
Yeah, so...
Can we talk about that, please?
So, yeah, this is definitely something that I'm really interested in and I'm really excited about because, I don't know, the story behind it was, the EVO founders, they made a company called Radiant where they made a fighting game called Rising Thunder. And it was kind of it was very Street Fighter style gameplay, but they put a lot of innovative accessibility features. So, for example, like the motion inputs for Shoryukens and Hadokens. Instead of having motion inputs, they just make a special move button where you just press that button and you get the move. But then the way they balanced that was they had a cooldown timer. Just like you would find in
League of Legends.
In League of Legends,
when
right?
When you use your skill shot or whatever it is, your Q,
yeah,
that has to then reset.
Exactly. So you can't just spam that special move all the time. So instead of making the execution barrier like a lever motion, it was the barrier was the cooldown time. And there are a few other like kind of things that they added in there to kind of open up accessibility. But it was also like it was a pretty deep game because it had like it had like all these combo extending options, and there was the characters were really interesting, and there's like a loadout system where you could kind of choose what kind of moves your character would have before the match started. There's some really cool stuff in there. I really like that game, and I talked about it a lot in my videos, and I think people kind of know me for having really liked that game. And then they got bought out by Riot, and so after that happened, it just was silent for a long time. And I was at EVO one time. I forgot which year it was, but I was at a panel with Tom Cannon. Tom Cannon was talking about the history of EVO, and I was just there to kind of just hear the story. And then when it came to the Q&A session, I was like, oh, cool, I can ask a question. I was like, okay, I went up and I was like, is there anything that you can say about this new Riot fighting game? And he basically said no. And I was like, okay. He's like, anything else? I'm like, no, that's all I wanted to know. And so, they're really super secret about it, right? They did do one thing that was kind of interesting. They released a community version of Rising Thunder. They kind of deleted that game from the internet after they got bought out, but they kind of released like a community version where they just gave whatever they had left of the game and let the community kind of make patches and stuff for it. So
I mean, I would have to imagine with Riot, how many League characters are there? There's a lot. There's a lot of League. What is there, like 150 or something like that?
There's a ton.
There's a ton. I would have to imagine that they would repurpose all the characters into popular League characters.
Yeah,
and just have a kind of another 143. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's some rumors and some speculation that that they would use the League of Legends characters to make a fighting game, which would be people will be familiar with the characters. They already have a ton.
Right.
And they can, in a fighting game, you can see the characters like very detailed, big on the screen. So that's really good for League of Legends too, right? That's fans of League of Legends I'm sure they'd be interested to see their favorite champions just doing badass stuff on the screen, very detailed and good quality graphics and stuff like that, right?
It's also interesting because from a market perspective, I don't think Valve and Blizzard are making fighting games, which is generally where Riot has been competing.
Yeah.
MOBAs are actually originally mods from StarCraft and Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always been some rivalry. You have Valve with Dota 2, you have Blizzard with StarCraft, all their RTS franchises, and Heroes of the Storm, and then you have Riot with League. But meanwhile, on a more Japanese front, you have Nintendo with their Smash franchises, whether that be Melee or whatever is going to be the newest iteration of Smash Brothers, or Capcom, or Bandai Namco.
Yeah.
With they own the Tekken franchise, right?
Bandai Namco.
Yeah, they own they own some other stuff too, right? They own the Dark Souls franchises and Pac-Man and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, Bandai Namco's responsible for Dragon Ball FighterZ as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So it would almost seem, assuming that Riot does do that they would be navigating into a very unique position.
Yeah.
Where the one thing it seems to me that Japanese fighters, maybe with Tekken 7 being the exception to this, is they've a lot of times had lackluster online play, or their games come out and they're not quite online play ready.
Okay.
Where it would seem like Riot would have the infrastructure to have this ready to go.
Right
upon launch.
I think Riot definitely, if there's any company that knows how to, make an online game, it's Riot, right? They definitely have the resources, and so, I'm pretty excited about all that. But then there's also, like, I've been talking to some friends about this, about what we think the game might be, and really there's so little information that you can really just speculate. But it doesn't. We realize it doesn't necessarily have to be like a Street Fighter style fighting game. It could be like a Smash style game, for example.
That's okay. You beat me to my next question.
Yeah,
is that Smash is kind of this weird, I guess it's what you call 2.5D, but it's on platforms.
Yeah, so the big thing
there's
that
nothing
makes,
quite like that.
Yeah, what makes Smash different from all the other fighters is Smash doesn't have walls. it's just death, right? There's
Yeah.
no walls. The edges are death.
It's this weird thing too. You're trying to knock a character out of the orbit
Exactly.
of the screen.
Yeah.
Versus trying to just knock them off a cliff or trying to deplete their health bar.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what the idea of a platform fighter is, right? So, and it's one of the reasons why the FGC and Smash are kind of different scenes, right? Because their games, obviously, Smash doesn't come from an arcade background, so there's like a difference in culture there. But if you look at the game, Smash is one of the things that like some people in the FGC will say to be mean to Smash is you guys aren't a real fighting game, right?
How dare they?
So that's kind of like it's kind of something people on Reddit will parrot and stuff like that, right? So I think the real reason is that they do come from different cultures, so they're just kind of like it's just you have like arcade culture and then you have like couch culture, console couch culture, right?
Right.
So I think it's getting better these days because the leaders in the FGC, they're accepting Smash and stuff like that, trying to make peace, in this holy war, right?
Bring all the tribes together.
Yeah, bring all the tribes together, right? Because there's so many commonalities really with the FGC and Smash, but they still have like their differences. Like they don't, Smash calls it friendlies and the FGC calls it casuals whenever you play a match that's not serious, right?
Yeah.
So the little things like that, they have like all these differences, and so but like generally, like when you meet in person, when you meet Smash people in person, FGC people, they're usually really nice to each other and they respect each other's games, and don't believe social media,
Yeah, actually, if I could chime in too, because there's so many. The internet can appear so toxic, but yeah, when I go to tournaments for any game,
yeah.
And being in Seoul, I go to a lot of different gaming things, but everybody's really nice.
Yeah.
Everybody's so nice and supportive.
It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
very nice to have that.
But I think especially if you're just somebody, I feel like the people that are really into drama, in competitive gaming,
Yeah.
are the same people that like probably really like reality TV and get into it a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think
even in reality TV, it's like those people lived together for 6 weeks. It couldn't have been that bad. They were all paid and they edited this together however they wanted to. That's why it's so cheap to make, but it's not as bad as maybe you want it to be.
Yeah. What's funny is there was a reality show for Street Fighter V.
Oh yeah,
you remember that?
Yeah. Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And before that, there was WCG Ultimate Gamer.
Oh, I don't know. What was
Chef
that about?
In Control Robinson. Did you know about this, Melty? You guys didn't know about this shit, right? Would you know In Control?
The commentator.
Yeah, commentator.
Yeah.
Formerly on EG.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on that.
Okay.
He was on a reality TV show.
Whoa. Okay.
How crazy is that? Yeah, they had that. That was some weird thing where they actually got the rights. Yeah, there it is. WCG Ultimate Gamer, and they had these two hosts. I don't know who these people are.
So did like
it was off. It was hot garbage. It was just like every game. This is one of these weird shows where they. I think Jeff lost because he had to do some kind of an obstacle course.
Okay, all right.
Which it just had nothing to do with gaming.
Yeah,
a lot of the games they picked out were weird. Justin Wong was on that.
Justin Wong was on that?
Wait, can we check?
No.
No, I swear. No. Okay.
Jay Wong?
Season one. Watch, I'm going to be wrong. I'm like, Santa Claus was there. Am I wrong? There's Jeff Robinson. Hold on. Oh my God, did I make this up?
Justin.
Wait a minute. Did I can
check number 2.
Yeah, wait, what if he was never on there?
Then we edit this out.
I mean, it's sued by Justin Wong. Check that. I swear there was some big fighting. There's Rachel Carrico.
Oh, there's Justin Wong.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah, okay. All right. I didn't make this up.
Whoa.
Yeah, and when you watch the show, all the other players are like, well, we're a little bit worried about Justin Wong. It's like, no shit. He's actually legit.
Wow.
Jeff In Control Robinson not going to be able to utilize his StarCraft or Warhammer skills on that show.
Wow.
And he didn't win either, which is how you know that show didn't make any sense. Who won season 1? Cat.
Wait.
Cat won season 2. Some shooting game person.
Okay. Was this about? Was the contest about like a certain game, or was it just like games together?
It was just some dumb reality TV show.
Oh, okay.
It was a bunch of people that probably actually hate games got together and decided they were going to try to make money.
Okay.
Is what happened.
All right.
Yeah, there was a bunch of people that went on that. Anyways, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, people are actually quite nice and supportive.
Yeah, in person. Yeah,
at these
definitely.
events.
Like, so, yeah, it was kind of a tangential thing, but yeah, like, in the community, I really stand by this idea that I really think, like, the internet, the stuff you see on the internet about people it gives you such a bad idea of what that person is actually like.
Yeah.
In person, most people I've met, like, even people that I thought was like, I don't know if I could ever be friends with that person or be cool with that person. Like, when I met them in real life, they're like the coolest people ever. That happens so often that now I'm actually like, I'm actively, even if someone makes me mad on Twitter or something, like, I'm like, I just think that person could be really cool in person. Like, I don't know right now. Even
in another life, you could have sat at the same lunch table in school.
Yeah,
talked
exactly.
about your favorite games.
Yeah, right. So like, I'm a big. I've now become a big believer of just never just don't hate somebody on the internet. Like, unless unless there's like a big thing that comes out about somebody where it's like, like this person's a murderer and he murdered like 10,000 people. Like, okay,
he got away with it for this long while going to esports
like
events.
You can like, hate on that person. And I know there are people who get like, there's some scandals where they've done some heinous things that come out and stuff like that. But generally, like, if somebody on the internet's like, I think this character's top tier, and you're like boiling with hatred, like, that's like the worst way to think of it, right?
Yeah.
Think of that person just because of some opinion or something, or I don't like this game, or whatever.
So what's the deal with FGC being anti, in quotes, esports?
Okay,
Because this is from an outside perspective. Let me just lay my case down here real quick here.
Yes, please.
Because in my view, now I grew up with StarCraft, watching that on TV. I would consider both StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 to be pretty laid back.
Okay.
It's not too. I mean, if you watch GSL, nobody's telling me what to do.
Okay.
Artos and me have complete creative control. We made some jokes. I don't think we ever go too far.
Yeah.
But we even encourage trash talk.
Yeah.
WCS, when we get them on the stage, was, hey, if you want to say something, feel free to say it. I mean, don't say something that we would.
Yeah. Obviously,
don't say something horrible and
right.
racist and offensive. But we encourage the trash talk. We want the players to make money. We want them to be supported. We want them to be stars. And that's always sort of been my view on esports. Now, I've definitely seen, and I think Riot, maybe to a fault, has had a little bit too much of a sterilized show at times with LCS and LCK. And by the way, I love all the broadcasters there. Nothing against the game. But I'd put them more on the conservative end of the spectrum.
Sure.
I would put FGC on the opposite end of that.
Yeah.
But as a StarCraft guy, I feel like I get to have the best of both worlds. Right?
Yeah,
I think Blizzard's been really laid back with kind of how this stuff's presented. But when I talk to FGC people, there's almost an eyeball roll when you say esports. And what I'm getting at is that when I think esports, I just think tournaments where you can make money and get sponsored and live your dream.
Yeah.
So when I hear that, I'm confused. Can you explain to me, or maybe other people like me, where someone from the FGC is coming from who seems to be almost allergic to that word esports? Yeah.
So basically, Street Fighter and these games, they were competitive for a very, very long time, obviously, right? So, before StarCraft, came out, and it's just this really old game.
I think it's the oldest competitive game.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest competitive games that's still played today in big tournaments and stuff like that. So
I can't think of anything that's around. It's Street Fighter 2 is older than Tetris, right?
I don't know. That you'd have to look that up, but
right,
I don't.
We'll check that. I'm just out of curiosity. We're gonna look that up.
But anyways, it's I don't know. It's one of the oldest competitive, especially head-to-head competitive games, right? So there's there are definitely cultural differences between the FGC and what's being called esports, right? And it's if you look at like I've seen a lot of like StarCraft highlight reels, and I've seen you commentate with Artosis, and you guys definitely like when I see you guys like having fun and stuff, that doesn't that's not the image that I have of the sterile esports or anything like that at all. I totally know what you mean. You guys are totally not like just trying to be boring to be as safe as possible or anything like that.
Yeah, we're not casting to a bunch of PTA moms.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
just a bunch of people that are anti-fun. Hold on one second. We got the numbers here. So, Street Fighter 1 release date 1987. Tetris release date 1984, the year of Tasteless.
Yeah. Tetris when you were born.
Yeah. That was a good book, good year. So wait, Street Fighter 1 was when?
It's 1987, but Street Fighter 1 was never played to the competitive level that...
So, yeah, I feel like it started with Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2 was when it was like... The game was like a big
Turbo.
Sensation, right? Yeah. So, I was right about 1991.
Nice. Well done.
Good. So, yeah. Anyway, so this whole esports thing is because I think there's a lot of... when you have like new sponsors and when you're trying to make a game, a franchise into an esport, obviously you're going to have to make some changes, right? And you're going to have to change, you can't, say certain things or act a certain way. And the degree of how much restrictions they're going to put on you, like, I don't know personally. I'm not like I'm not a commentator or anything. I'm just a YouTuber. I can say whatever, right? And
yeah, you have a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I mean,
same with us here in this podcast.
Yeah, like, I'm not worried about, like, I mean, obviously I can ruin my own channel, but, it's,
right.
It'll be my own,
If you want to become a flat earther channel, you can.
Yeah, I can turn into flat earther channel and whatever, right? But it's so I can't say because I haven't been in the industry, but from what I've been seeing, like, it's not like it's not like I'm seeing these completely different people that are commentating. But if you look at like CPT events, like Street Fighter 5 events, and you look at the commentators, they're acting, pretty similar to, how I've seen them for a long time, right? Maybe like, like some of the excitement, the way they get excited, maybe a little bit different here and there, right? But I think James Chen posted a clip of some older like Street Fighter 4 video where like they're like, yeah, like, this is, I probably would have done that differently or whatever. But it was like sometimes when the commentators just kind of like lose it and they kind of forget where they are, like, kind of moments and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's I don't know if that's an imposed thing or if they're kind of like just worried about that, or if I don't know what's.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is what are they worried is going to be taken away? Now I've done a lot of different shows, so I definitely know when someone's come down and said something like, hey, we're really thinking about doing this or this, and I'm thinking, oh, fuck, this is going to ruin the show.
Okay.
Or this is, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Even when we did the ESGN stuff.
Yeah.
There was times where, and I was doing that with Mike Ross and Gutex, but there was times where, we would go to the hotel bar and have some wine and look at each other and think we're not happy with, some of the ideas that were going around, right?
Yeah.
And it can be a scary thing. I think especially when you're a presenter and you have somebody telling you to do this or that, and you're thinking, okay, I'm sort of the face here. I'm the guy.
Yeah.
I'm the channel that this show is being spoken through, and it can be definitely uncomfortable when someone's saying, try this or that.
Yeah.
I've even had shows where people have tried to write jokes for me.
Whoa.
This will be for another podcast.
Okay.
But, I'm like, dude, you do that's, and it's stuff where I'm thinking I wouldn't even say that, and then I'm getting stressed out because of some fucking dumb joke.
Yeah.
And I so I can imagine that fear, but I guess beyond people kind of trying to, because there's always going to be some push and pull here with any show. Anytime you have a bunch of people trying to come together to make one thing, this is always going to be something that happens. And I know I'm putting you in a weird spot because you don't speak for all of FGC, right?
Yeah. All I can say is, like, some of the concerns that people have had.
Yeah.
And they're real. And I think a lot of it, people are scared of what potentially could happen. So if you look at the reality show thing that happened, that was another big milestone for the FGC in terms of like how esports can.
What was the
create
name of
these
that
new-
reality show again?
I forget. It was.
The one that was an FGC reality show. Melty's going to look that up for us.
Yeah, it was on E-League, or it was an E-League production, which they do stuff for like other games and stuff, and they're definitely like they're Turner Broadcasting, so it's like real big time esports stuff, right? So I guess one of the things was about that people were afraid of was this, so if you look at that E-League reality show. It was kind of like the people that they, got on the show. Like, so one of the big examples, it was like it blew up in the news, and I think that's probably why they got this guy. Is there's a guy named Low Tier God, and he's maybe you saw the video where like he had that grudge match with
the greatest videos of all time.
Yeah, one of the best.
It's like his Blanca
FGC
versus
moments.
The guy's Rose.
And there's
at
a
the
lot
end
of
the
trash talk and stuff.
The guy says it was even the appearance of this big, badass looking black dude and this white guy with his shirt tucked in. And then Low Tier God loses and.
Yes.
What was the other guy's name?
Viscount. He's
Viscount. Yeah,
he's an Evo champion in Marvel. He's an amazing player, super smart guy. Like he writes really good stuff. Like it's definitely like. Very highly respected player in the FGC, but Low Tier God's kind of more of a, I guess he's he likes to trash talk,
which I think is great.
And he's definitely like he's got this entertainment factor, right? Because sometimes he'll cross the line, and he'll ride the line a lot, and definitely like it's and it's become kind of controversial for that, right, in the FGC. But then like he's also a player. And he's a good player, but he's definitely not like one of the best players.
By the way, it's E-League the Challenger Street Fighter 5.
Yeah, E-League the Challenger. Okay, so it was called the Challenger. Yeah,
on
so
TBS.
So basically, it was like some people in the community were like, oh, okay, this is what esports has become now. So they're doing this reality show where they're trying to pick somebody to go on to the actual competition, the invitational, and they invited Low Tier God. He's not like he's not like a top level player. There are
he's
other
not an
players.
Evo champion. Maybe they're picking personality.
Yeah, they're picking personality, and and like so it was kind of controversial, and like it's things like that, right? So these kind of things scare some people in the FGC because it's now like it's about FGC is about like the competition and skill and about the game, right?
I suppose there's also always something alarming about reality TV in general.
Yeah,
because reality TV just isn't actually reality TV at all. I mean,
exactly.
You can edit this together basically however you want.
You can, and so it's reality TV. That's kind of like the definition of like TV entertainment. Like
it's the McDonald's of entertainment.
Yeah, like it's like very mainstream TV entertainment, right? So I don't know. I mean, I don't think that is just that's going to spell the end of the FGC, but definitely you can see why some people had these kind of concerns. Basically, what kind of goes on with the FGC, what I kind of want to see happen is like this kind of esports stuff and the grassroots stuff kind of coexisting peacefully, if possible.
But when you're saying, so you would consider that reality TV show to be like an esports thing? Because I look at that as some kind of weird abomination of just taking a gaming and a thing like that and saying, okay, now we're going to put a bunch of people in a room and kind of theme that around.
The thing was,
who gets along with who.
So I think one of the players from the Invitational, or one of the players from the reality show would take the 30-second spot on the program. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe that reality show was related to the full tournament and of the actual invitational tournament, right? So I mean, there are really good players on there, like Commander Jesse and JB. Those are like really good American players, and they're top players for sure in Street Fighter V. But yeah, like this having Low Tier God on there was definitely like okay, now this is an example of where they got this guy for entertainment. and clearly for entertainment because it would be controversial and and it worked. The FGC went into this frenzy and everyone knew about this reality show and everything. It was like a very big promotional thing. So there's the idea of that. And then the thing about one big area of contention for the whole, FGC versus esports thing is definitely the idea of invitationals, right? So that kind of goes against the idea of a open bracket tournament, right? And that's where some of
there's no meritocracy there. It's just
yeah,
you didn't earn your way in there.
So it's the gatekeeper is kind of different, right? So now there's if you have an invitational with 32 people, right, and one of the players bad mouths the wrong person or whatever or says something about the game or says something bad, then they can just be you're not invited to the invitational, right? And they'd be in the right to do that. They can do that. It's their invitational tournament, right? And we're talking about big life-changing prize pools at these tournaments. We're talking I think E-League usually had $150,000 for the first place winner. Second place was a cool $40,000. I mean, this is real prize money that the FGC rarely ever gets to see. And so it's life-changing stuff, right? So it's a big deal. And so, this, if you look at the grassroots method for these kind of tournaments, it's obviously the open bracket tournament where you have 2,000 people all participating in this one thing. And it's a very community thing, right? And there are some people who feel that it's kind of anti-community to have these kind of, these leagues where it's just invitationals and you just have to, maybe they're picking people because of looks, maybe they're picking people because they're say the most correct things, and you don't really know exactly what's going on.
It's like they're trying to cast a TV show based off of personalities and not.
That's the fear, right?
Yeah.
Now, granted, if you look at the E-League tournament, it was run really well. I mean, people in the FGC really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. There were a couple of hiccups there, here and there, where they kind of, were doing anti-FGC things or not quite FGC way things. But they kind of made efforts to cater it more towards the FGC crowd and stuff like that. So it's not like this, this thing was just all terrible and the esports is ruining everything. It wasn't quite like that. But definitely there are these concerns, and the players on there they're the best players for the game. They're all so good, there's nobody on these things where they're just completely bad players, right? But then again, there's were they necessarily the very best players that they could have had? It's well, you can tell they're probably conscious of having more representation from certain countries maybe, or other things might have gone into the how they pick these players, right? And but people really aren't sure, who gets picked exactly, right? So that's one of the things of concern. Whereas the idea of Evo is kind of you have a guy from Compton that no one's ever heard of, but he's just really good at the game, walks into Evo, first Evo ever,
dark horse,
and just kills everybody, including the legends and the top names, gets first place and becomes a top player. I'm basically right now I'm describing Snake Eyes, from Street Fighter 4. He's one of the best American players during the Street Fighter 4 days. He's playing 5, but he's not finding as much success in 5. But definitely that's kind of the fighting game spirit that people don't want lost. And then on the internet there was there's kind of this big argument with some esports guys and the FGC guys about this whole stuff, and they just got into this. It just became pretty nasty, right? And I don't know where it's at right now. I don't know. I think it's just people are just they're still doing their tournaments and everything, and I think they're still invitationals and stuff. But I think that's the biggest area. Forget about commentary or erase that part from the podcast. That's actually nothing compared to I think this is this is the thing that has the biggest effect on people, right? So I'm not here to say this is I can't say if this is ruining stuff.
If you don't mind if we just keep it in, I mean, I think everything you're saying is really interesting.
Okay, yeah, if it's interesting, keep it in. But I mean, there's little things.
I don't think anybody's going to hold you to
yeah,
hold your feet to the fire on this one, because this is a big. I mean, one of the things that I noticed when you're bringing that up is I'm thinking there aren't actually in StarCraft. There's not very many invitationals. So
Okay.
like this thing that you're pointing out is something that I haven't really experienced within the games that I do, or I don't know if this happens as much in League or let's say Dota or Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
So because I see the concerns as well when you point that out. You would never have a Snake Eyes who might at the time be the best player, let's say, that could have gone on E-League.
Yeah.
If you're already going to grandfather other players in. But
Exactly.
that almost seems like it's more of a problem with cable TV and not having the infrastructure to run qualifiers all over the place and filter in the right people.
Yeah,
And
so,
instead
I
trying to
mean-
do a catch-all and safely put out some kind of product and see if they can rinse and repeat.
Yeah, so I mean, I there's definitely like these invitationals and leagues, they do things differently, right? How do they find new talent? They all have kind of different methods of doing so, right? It's just that the original people that have been doing this forever are the tournament organizers that have been, when they started taking a loss, doing these tournaments, right?
Sure.
And so they've been doing this forever, and they finally got to a certain point. And of course, nobody wants this, these like huge media juggernauts to come in and like, just, take away the players. And I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, there's definitely a fear of like, if you think about it, like, I think it can coexist just fine or whatever. But like, if there was like a weekend, right, where there's like this big invitational thing, and then there's like a big, tournament for a grassroots tournament, right? Like you might not get all those players for your, and you can't blame the players because it's like, okay, you have your chance to win more prize money than you've had in your whole like 20-year career of playing fighting games in this one tournament. Like you can't really blame the players. So it's like, it's just like this new entity that comes in, and I don't know. I'm not in this. I'm not a player, so I'm. I mean, I'm a player. Like I'll play in open bracket tournaments and stuff to just because it's fun, exciting, and stuff. But I'm not like a player that would get into one of these invitationals, right? I'm not a commentator. That's another thing. Like these invitationals, like they have to choose a certain amount of commentators and stuff like that. So it affects those guys way more. And I'm not a sponsor. Sponsors get affected by this too. If your sponsored player makes it to E-League or some nationally televised thing, that's a huge, huge deal, right? I mean, that's, nothing better to brag to your sponsors than like, oh yeah, our guys are on TV now,
Yeah.
And so, for all those groups, like it's definitely, it affects them in a different way. Whereas like, if you're like the guy who makes, 180th place at Evo and you're super proud of it and, you got to play some top players, like that's not going to affect you as much, right? You're not going to get invited to the invitationals, obviously, right? But then if invitationals were to replace open bracket tournaments completely, then all those people who like were friends with the players and like, who worked really hard with their spare time, but they weren't able to, get to the top levels, like, those people won't be able to have these tournaments anymore. And then if you lose that, then you lose like a very big core pillar of the FGC. And I think people are afraid of losing something like that. Not that I don't think that's going to happen, but I think there is a fear that when you lose that aspect, then it's like, okay, we just lost one of the best aspects of the FGC. Like, Xavier Woods played Knee at Evo. He was so excited. It's on his channel. Like there's a clip of him like playing, and like those kind of moments where you have like because like in StarCraft it's the games are longer and stuff, so you can't have like 1,000-man open bracket tournament, right? It'd be like,
I mean, you could have pretty big qualifiers. You just can't cover it all at once.
in one weekend, right?
What they do is they try to, yeah. I mean, there's all these online. Mel, do you do online casting stuff? I mean, it's a lot of it. More of it's done on the internet.
Okay.
And then you kind of filter into finally, okay, everybody, we're going to Stockholm.
All right.
All the guys that made it, guys and girls that made it, we'll see you guys there. But yeah, did you have something you want to add in, Melty? Melty's explaining how they do their invitationals.
Okay.
But it is. There used to be big in DreamHacks and stuff, big open bracket tournaments. That's hard because people are bringing their computers and then getting that all on the network. I don't know the nitty gritty details about that. But I see what you're saying. And I think it comes from a place of love, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard situation because like these are the people that you've known and played in tournaments and stuff, and if they it's this whole idea of like if they go off to Hollywood and you might never see them again, and maybe they'll change, like it's the classic
You
thing.
changed, man.
Yeah, like it's a classic, like what if your friend makes it in Hollywood or something, like are you gonna see them again? Are they gonna hang out in your circles? Are they gonna hang out with like Bradley Cooper and stuff like that? Like so, it's kind of I think there's kind of that primal fear of community. I actually made a video about it.
I think it's like a fear of an interloper coming in and then changing everything and what you had and what was built up before.
Exactly.
Isn't really there before, and there's some kind of an identity crisis because of that.
Yeah, and like people experience this all the time in like in more personal matters. Like everyone's had like one of their close friends get like a new girlfriend and then just disappear, or just a girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever.
Right. Friend comes back from college and he's totally different.
Yeah. It's people find new groups, and definitely this is something that like so in my video about community, actually, this was so interesting to me because FGC was going through this, and so I read a book about it because there's kind of an interesting book that I actually based one of my videos off of, and it talks about all these patterns and stuff with communities and what happens, and Alcoholics Anonymous is kind of an interesting case, right? Because it's a similar thing happened with Alcoholics Anonymous. Originally, why is it anonymous, right? So I did a little bit of research on that. One of my friends was a part of Alcoholics Anonymous, but what ended up happening was when people in Alcoholics Anonymous, before it was anonymous, they got recognized in the community, and they were like stand-up models, and like they were like these people that everyone looked up to. They would then people would start using that fame that they got from that community to advertise for like commercial purposes, and even politically. Some people would say like, oh yeah, I'm part of this alcoholics club, and I'm a recovered alcoholic from this community, right? And they would score political points, right, when they're running for office and stuff like that. Or some people might use it for like their business purposes to advertise, this business is run by this person who survived alcohol or whatever. And the people who ran Alcoholics, or this group, started realizing that it became like kind of started getting commercialized. There were like stars and stuff like that were appearing. And I think a big thing was this baseball player was a part of this, right? And at first they were like, this is awesome, man. Everyone's going to know about our like alcoholics group. Like, and it's going to be a good thing for us. But then like what ended up happening was I think it was a baseball player. And this was around the time when baseball was starting to get televised, and like the media came up, and you're broadcasting this to a lot of people. And I believe this started causing issues with like, if you're like a famous person now, you're no longer like serving that community directly anymore, because now you're just like in the media and you're a star.
You're probably not going to meetings.
Yeah, you're not going to meetings anymore.
Drinking coffee and
like helping each other, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole point of the community, right?
Now you're just advertising that you're, I guess, rehabilitated in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And then like it's not.
Which I mean, in a sense, is okay. That's great. You overcame this vice, but then I don't know if you can leverage that group the same way.
Yeah. So
I think is what you're saying.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is people in the community start competing to get recognition, and they start like it's not about helping each other anymore. It's about who can be Hollywood. Who can make it to be the most.
And I think in that case as well, it's trying to signal purity.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah. So the anonymous aspect was one of the reasons was because there was like a commercial motive, and if you look at like a lot of communities that do split, there's a lot of it is because there's like a I guess I don't want to say sponsors per se, but just people with money like that can influence things, right? And I'm not gonna say this is like bad or good you have to look at the situation, right? But definitely, it's one thing that can change the way the communities operate and stuff like that. And sometimes some communities can are okay with it, but other times it's just like it's kind of a bummer, right? And this is what causes fractures in communities, and they split up, and that's life, right? That's how communities work. So yeah, we're kind of seeing this a little bit, but I don't know like what the future is going to be per se with the fighting game community. But just for me, I just want to play these games, go to these tournaments, and make videos about them, and these games and stuff like really interest me, and I want to teach people how to play these games and stuff, right?
I think this is a great note to end it on, man. Dude, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, man. I love your videos. Definitely check out Gerald's videos. Do you have now that we've talked about how shit social media is, do you want to plug your Twitter? Anywhere else people can find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Korea Gaming, Corea Gaming, one word. And you can find my YouTube channel by typing that in Google as well. So
Patreon?
I do have a Patreon, but if you just watch my videos, and you'll have a Patreon link, and you can go there if you want or not. But I'd rather you watch the video first before doing anything with Patreon. So,
dude, thanks so much for being on the show, and thank you, viewers, for listening. That's a wrap. That does it for episode 3, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. I got to say, every podcast I do, I'm having more fun than the one before. I really feel like I'm getting the hang of this. And thank you, everybody who's been supporting us over here at the Tasteless Podcast on Patreon. We're going to be having... Are we going to announce the next guest? Is it a secret still?
It's going to be a secret still by the time this gets published.
You don't get to know who the next guest is. I'll be announcing that on Twitter soon. But again, special thanks to Gerald. Definitely send him some love. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We love you. Bye-bye. This episode was produced by Melton. Artwork by Ala Reese. Music by Mark Lentz. Hosted by Tasteless. Thank you for watching.